In winter, medieval huts could turn colder than the air outside, frost biting the walls, wind slipping through every gap. Yet peasants lay down each night and woke again. What happened between dusk and dawn holds details few have ever heard, and they defy everything you thought you knew about medieval survival. The secrets that kept entire families alive through brutal winters weren't just about endurance, they were engineering marvels hidden under piles of straw and animal fur. Here's what it was really like to survive a winter night in medieval Europe. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. So, we're going back to medieval Europe tonight. But hold on, get yourself comfortable first. I mean it. Fix your pillows, grab that blanket. This one's worth settling in for. You open your eyes to complete darkness. The cold hits you first, a sharp, brutal slap across your face, the only part of you exposed to the air. Your breath forms little clouds that disappear into the blackness above. That distinct smell fills your nostrils. Smoke, animals, unwashed bodies, and something earthy that seems to seep from the walls themselves. It's that hour before dawn when the world feels like it's holding its breath, the coldest part of the night. This isn't your bed. This is a peasant hut in medieval Europe sometime in the 1300s, and you're about to discover how people survived winter nights that regularly dropped below freezing without any of the things you take for granted. No central heating, no insulated walls, no electric blankets, not even a proper chimney. I spent months researching medieval heating systems for a history project, and let me tell you, what I found was mind-blowing. These people weren't just huddling together and hoping for the best. They had systems, really clever systems that most history books completely ignore. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the heavy layers of scratchy wool and straw beneath you. The hut is tiny, maybe 15 feet across, with walls made of timber frames filled with wattle and daub, a mixture of sticks, clay, and animal dung. There's a hole in the roof for smoke to escape, but it also lets in the occasional snowflake that melts before it reaches the floor. The first thing that catches your attention is the floor. It's not flat. There's a depression in the center, about 2 feet deep and 4 feet across. That's where the fire is. Not on the floor like you'd expect, but sunken into it. This isn't some primitive design flaw. This is medieval engineering at its finest. Wait, you might be thinking, why put a fire in a hole? Wouldn't that make it harder to cook over? Actually, this sunken hearth was a stroke of genius. When medieval peasants dug their fires into the ground, they discovered something that transformed their ability to survive winter. See, a regular fire on a flat surface sends heat straight up. Great if you're standing directly over it, useless if you're anywhere else in the room. But a sunken hearth, that changed everything. The physics worked like this. When you put a fire below floor level, the heat flows sideways first before rising. It's like spreading butter on warm bread. The warmth distributes evenly across the entire floor instead of shooting straight up to the ceiling. This meant every corner of the hut got some heat, not just the area directly above the flames. And those stones surrounding the hearth, they're not just to prevent fires from spreading. Those heavy rocks absorbed heat all day and kept radiating warmth hours after the flames died down. They worked like medieval heat batteries, storing enough warmth to keep toes from freezing until sunrise. Okay, but what kind of stones? I literally spent hours researching this because it matters. River rocks. They worked best because they held heat longest without cracking under thermal stress. Medieval peasants knew this from experience. The wrong kind of stone could literally explode if it got too hot too fast. The old woman tending the fire, you assume she's the grandmother, kneels beside the sunken hearth. Her fingers are gnarled with arthritis, but she moves with the confidence of someone who's done this thousands of times. She stirs the embers with a stick, bringing the fire back to life after its night under a blanket of ash. That's another thing. These fires almost never went out completely. Banking the fire, covering hot coals with ash before bed, kept embers alive all night. It was like putting the heat to sleep instead of killing it. Done right, the buried coals stayed warm until morning and could be revived with a bit of kindling and some strategic blowing. In your head, you're doing the math. No fire for 8 hours, pre-death by freezing. Medieval peasants couldn't just strike a match to start over. Fire was life, and keeping it alive overnight was a skill passed down through generations. The floor under your feet feels unexpectedly warm. Looking closer, you notice it's not just dirt. There's a layer of ash spread beneath the rushes covering the floor. This wasn't laziness or poor housekeeping. Ash contains thousands of tiny air pockets that trap and hold warmth much better than plain dirt. Some peasants even mixed ash with clay for better heat retention, creating a thermal barrier against the cold earth. "This is actually brilliant," you whisper, and the old woman looks up, obviously not understanding your words, but recognizing the tone of appreciation. She gestures for you to come closer to the fire, which is now crackling to life. The central placement of the hearth was strategic too. It distributed heat equally in all directions. A wall fire would only warm half the space. This central position ensured every sleeping spot got its fair share of heat. You glance up and notice another key feature of the hut: wooden platforms near the ceiling. These elevated sleeping areas weren't just space-saving measures, they were prime real estate during freezing nights. You see, hot air rises, while cold air sinks toward the floor. Heated air floats up and collects near the ceiling. Those platforms, essentially wooden lofts, captured the warmest air in the hut. The temperature difference between floor level and the raised sleeping area could be several degrees, enough to make the difference between shivering misery and comfortable rest. You watch as children begin to stir on these platforms. They were given the elevated spots because their smaller bodies lost heat faster than adults. The old woman reaches up and helps a young boy, maybe 5 years old, climb down from the loft. His hair is matted, his face smudged with dirt. But he looks well rested and reasonably warm despite the freezing temperatures outside. "Whoa, wait," you say, though nobody understands you. Did people actually sleep comfortably in these conditions? The answer is surprisingly complex. Medieval peasants didn't just survive winter nights, they developed systems to sleep through them with reasonable comfort. The key was in how they built their beds. Looking more closely at the sleeping platforms, you notice they're not solid. There are small gaps between the wooden planks. This clever design allowed heated air to flow up from below while still providing solid sleeping surfaces. It was like sleeping on a warm air grate, except comfortable enough for a full night's rest. The platform beds themselves are layered with thick straw mattresses, not the thin bedding you might imagine, but substantial constructions. These were thick bundles sewn into cloth casings, creating thousands of insulating air pockets. Each piece of straw was like a tiny thermos bottle, holding warm air in its hollow center. Multiply that by thousands of straws, and you get serious insulating power. The old woman notices you examining the bedding and pulls back a corner of the straw mattress with pride. You can see it's not just a single layer. There are actually 2 distinct bundles with an air gap between them, creating an insulation sandwich. The trapped air prevented heat from transferring downward into the cold platform below. "That's at least a foot thick," you murmur, impressed. In cold regions, winter bedding often reached 12 inches deep. Climbing in was like sinking into a warm, lumpy cloud that smelled distinctly like a barn. Not pleasant by modern standards, but far better than freezing to death. Around the edges of the sleeping areas, you notice rolled cloth barriers, like pool noodles made of fabric. These sealed the edges of the bedding, preventing heated air from leaking out sideways. It was like caulking gaps around windows, except the windows were beds. The old woman motions for you to help her roll up the bedding. You notice the layering strategy. Heavier materials on the bottom for support, light, fluffy materials on top for maximum air trapping right next to bodies. The whole family's bedding is piled together in the day to conserve space in the tiny hut. A young woman, probably the mother, emerges from a corner where she's been feeding a baby. She's wearing what looks like a wool cap, even indoors. This wasn't a fashion choice. Woolen nightcaps were essential survival gear for peasants who knew heat escapes from heads faster than water through a broken dam. The head thing makes sense, you nod. We lose like 30% of our body heat through our heads. Actually, that's a modern myth, but medieval peasants were onto something important. The head's rich blood supply does make it a significant heat leak. A bare head in winter was like leaving the front door wide open while trying to heat the house. Nightcaps were knitted tight to hug scalps and trap radiating heat. Some covered ears and necks for better retention. The mother adjusts her cap and reaches for a piece of cloth hanging near the fire. She folds it quickly and wraps it around her neck several times before tucking the ends in. Neck sealing was an advanced technique. The neck is like the body's chimney. If you don't block it, heat escapes upward. Another mystery catches your eye. In the corner of the hut, behind a simple wooden barrier, several chickens are huddled together, occasionally clucking softly. There's also what appears to be a goat lying on a bed of straw. These animals weren't just food sources, or kept for eggs and milk. They were living heaters. "No way," you whisper. "They brought livestock inside for warmth." The old woman nods as if understanding your question, pointing to the animals and then hugging herself in a universal gesture for warmth. Farm animals produce body heat constantly without requiring fuel or maintenance. One goat could raise a small hut's temperature by several degrees, like having a furnace that fed itself and provided milk for breakfast. The arrangement was mutually beneficial. The animals received shelter while the humans gained a steady heat source that never went out. Different animals offered different heating benefits. Pigs generated intense warmth from their body mass, while chickens worked well in groups, multiplying their heating effect through clustering. The barriers separating animal areas from human sleeping spaces meant heat benefits without having to share beds with livestock. It was like having roommates who couldn't complain but made barnyard comments at inconvenient hours. The positioning of animals within the hut was strategic too. Larger animals were kept near the centre where their heat could reach everyone. Smaller animals like chickens were placed in corners, creating heated pockets perfect for children to sleep near. You notice something else interesting about the animals. Their bedding. The straw under the goat and chickens isn't just for their comfort. It serves double duty as hut insulation. Their breath adds warm, moist air that feels more comfortable than dry heat, like having multiple humidifiers that generated heat without electricity. The timing worked perfectly too. Animals are most active in evenings and early mornings, producing peak warmth when humans needed it most. Natural biological rhythms aligned with human heating requirements. But the smell, you think, wrinkling your nose. And yes, the odour is strong. A mixture of animal waste, unwashed bodies, smoke, and the earthiness of the structure itself. But freezing to death has a worse odour. Survival meant accepting the less pleasant aspects of effective heating. The old woman catches your expression and laughs, making a similar face and pointing to the animals. Some things transcend language. She shrugs as if to say, "Yes, it stinks, but we stay warm." The father of the family stirs now, rising from his sleeping spot on the floor near the fire. Unlike the children, adults often slept at ground level to tend the fire during the night. He stretches and immediately moves to check the animals, adding some feed to keep them generating maximum heat. Well-fed animals generated more body heat. It was like biological central heating that also produced eggs, milk, and eventually meat. The arrangement required careful feed planning to maximize heat production during the coldest parts of winter. What's really crazy, you think to yourself, is that this isn't random. This is a system. And you're right. These weren't desperate people doing whatever they could to survive. This was sophisticated engineering using available materials and a deep understanding of heat, insulation, and biology. The entire family is awake now, moving through what is clearly a well-established morning routine. The father adds wood to the fire while the mother prepares a simple breakfast, a pot of something porridge-like cooking over the flames. The children fold bedding and help with chores. You notice something odd about their movements. They all seem to be following the heat. As the fire grows stronger, family members shift position, capturing maximum warmth while completing their tasks. It reminds you of cats seeking sun patches across a floor. "So wait," you say aloud, though they don't understand. "Did medieval peasants just shiver all winter and hope for the best? Or did they actually sleep through the night?" The answer, you discover as the day unfolds, is neither. Medieval peasants didn't sleep straight through winter nights at all. They practiced a form of segmented sleep that worked perfectly for their survival needs. As the grandmother stirs the porridge, she begins telling a story to the smallest child. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm is soothing, almost hypnotic. The older woman gestures to the fire, then to the sleeping platforms, then makes a motion like banking the flames. She holds up 2 fingers, then closes her eyes briefly, then opens them wide, then closes them again. It suddenly clicks. She's describing their sleep pattern, first sleep and second sleep, with a period of wakefulness in between. It wasn't poor sleep, it was intentional scheduling that gave time to tend fires during the coldest, most dangerous night hours. The pattern went like this: bed after sunset for about 4 hours, a natural middle night awakening for 1 to 2 hours of activity, then second sleep until dawn. The timing aligned perfectly with natural body rhythms and practical heating requirements. That's actually healthier than how we sleep now, you realise. Modern research suggests humans naturally tend towards segmented sleep when not influenced by artificial lighting and strict schedules. The grandmother mimes tending the fire during that middle night awakening, then checking on the children, adjusting bedding and other essential tasks. The wakeful period served multiple practical purposes beyond fire management. You realise you're witnessing something remarkable, not a primitive struggle for survival, but a sophisticated system that worked with nature instead of against it. These peasants weren't just enduring winter, they had mastered it using nothing but careful observation, generational knowledge, and materials they could gather from their immediate environment. As the family sits down to their morning meal, the father opens the door to check the weather. A blast of frigid air rushes in, and you feel your modern appreciation for central heating surge. Outside, the world is covered in frost, trees standing like crystalline sculptures against a pale sky. But inside this humble hut, despite the simplicity and the smell, it's surprisingly comfortable. Not warm by modern standards, certainly, but survivable. Even pleasant in its way. The grandmother catches your eye and smiles, nodding toward the fire. She doesn't need words to communicate her pride in this system that has kept her family alive through countless winters. 7 simple techniques working together transformed medieval survival from desperate endurance into strategic comfort. And as you watch this family go about their mourning, you realize you've been thinking about medieval life all wrong. These weren't people stumbling through a primitive existence, waiting for progress to rescue them. These were ingenious engineers using physics, biology, and careful observation to solve one of humanity's most persistent challenges: how to stay warm when the world turns cold. The real miracle wasn't just that they survived, it's how well they survived using nothing but what nature provided and what their hands could build. The morning meal is simple but filling: a thick porridge made from barley and a few dried apples from last autumn's harvest. The family eats quickly, no one speaking much. When every calorie matters for survival, eating isn't social time. It's refueling. Can I try some? You wonder, and as if reading your mind, the grandmother pushes a wooden bowl toward you. The porridge is bland but oddly satisfying, with a nutty flavour and occasional sweet bursts from the dried fruit. No sugar, of course. That's a luxury even most nobles can't afford regularly. The father gets up first, wiping his bowl clean with a piece of hard bread. Nothing goes to waste here. He pulls on a second woolen tunic over the one he slept in and wraps his legs in strips of cloth, medieval leggings that provide surprising warmth. "All right, you're probably wondering why they're wearing all those layers instead of pants," the father says. Okay, he doesn't actually say that, but if he could, he'd explain that multiple thin layers trap heat better than one thick layer. The cloth strips around his legs can be adjusted for different activities and dried quickly if they get wet. Crucial when you only own 2 sets of clothes and freezing to death is a daily threat. The mother hands him a cloth bundle, lunch, and he heads for the door. There's work to be done regardless of temperature. Fields need maintenance, animals need tending, and wood needs cutting. Winter isn't a holiday, it's just harder work for less reward. Before leaving, he checks the woodpile stacked carefully near the door. It's organised by size and type: small kindling pieces, medium logs, and a few larger pieces that will burn slowly. This isn't random. Each size serves a specific purpose in fire management. Got enough wood there? You might joke, but the stakes are deadly serious. Running out of firewood in winter was a death sentence. Medieval peasants started collecting the next winter's wood the moment the previous winter ended. The father eyes the pile, mentally calculating if it will last until spring. As he opens the door, another blast of frigid air sweeps in. Outside, the world is a grayscale painting: white snow, black tree trunks, and the grey sky promising more snow before nightfall. His breath forms thick clouds as he steps out, closing the door quickly behind him. With the father gone, the hut feels immediately colder. It's not just psychological. You've lost a human heating element. The mother notices too and adds a small piece of wood to the fire, just enough to maintain heat, not a bit more. You'd burn through a week's worth of wood in a day if you tried to make the place actually warm by modern standards. The children are getting ready for their day too. The oldest, a girl of maybe 12, helps her younger siblings dress in multiple layers. Even the smallest tasks take longer in winter. Cold fingers fumble with clothing, stiff fabric resists folding, and no one wants to expose skin to the chilly air. So this is their morning routine, you ask, though they can't understand you. What happens now? The grandmother answers your question through actions. She reaches for a basket in the corner and pulls out wool, some raw and fluffy, some already spun into yarn. Winter was prime time for indoor work. Daylight hours were spent on essential tasks that couldn't be done in the dark, while the longer evenings were dedicated to crafts and repairs. The mother joins her, settling by the fire with a spindle. Her fingers move automatically, drawing out the wool and twisting it into yarn with practiced motions. This isn't just busy work, it's survival. New clothes, repairs to blankets, and items to trade all come from these hours of spinning and weaving. The medieval economy at work, you mutter, watching their practiced movements. The grandmother looks up and smiles, misinterpreting your words as admiration for her skill. She holds out a tuft of wool, offering to teach you. As you awkwardly attempt to copy her movements, you notice something about the wool. It's incredibly oily. Modern wool has been cleaned and processed, but this raw material is still full of lanolin, the natural oil from sheep. It makes your fingers slippery, but serves a purpose. The oil provides water resistance and additional insulation to the finished garments. Smart, you say, and the grandmother nods, somehow understanding your meaning across centuries of language difference. The oldest daughter has set up her own work now, using a small loom to weave what looks like the edge of a blanket. Even the younger children have tasks, winding yarn into balls or sorting different colours of wool. What strikes you most is how economical every movement seems. No one expends energy unnecessarily. They sit close to the fire, minimizing the space that needs heating. They work steadily but not hurriedly. Conservation of heat, energy, and resources is built into every action. The youngest boy, perhaps 4 years old, has been watching you with undisguised curiosity. He suddenly darts to a corner of the hut and returns with something clutched in his small hand. He holds it out to you, a roughly carved wooden horse, worn smooth from handling. "For me?" you ask, surprised by the gesture. He nods enthusiastically, pushing it into your hands. Even in survival mode, there's room for play, for sharing, for humanity. The toy is clearly precious to him, probably his only one, yet he's offering it to a stranger. The grandmother says something to him, her tone gentle but firm. He looks disappointed, but nods. The mother explains with gestures. The toy belongs to the boy, but he can show it to you. Ownership means something different when you have almost nothing. As you hand the horse back, you notice its clever design. The legs are slightly weighted at the bottom, so it stands easily. Someone spent hours getting it just right, precious time carved out of a survival-focused existence to create joy for a child. Midday approaches, marked by the changing angle of the pale sunlight filtering through the small window openings. These aren't glass windows. Glass is far too expensive for peasant homes. Instead, they're openings covered with oiled parchment that lets in some light while keeping out the worst of the wind. The coverings can be opened in summer for ventilation, but remain tightly sealed in winter. The mother sets aside her spinning and moves to the fire. Lunch preparation is minimal. She uncovers a pot that's been sitting at the edge of the embers all morning. Inside is a stew that's been slowly cooking, using heat that would otherwise be wasted. Medieval slow cooker technology. What's in the stew, you wonder aloud. Looking closer, you see mostly root vegetables, turnips, carrots, perhaps some parsnips, with what might be small pieces of salted pork for flavour. Meat was precious in winter, used more as seasoning than main course. The grandmother reaches to a small pouch hanging near the fire and sprinkles something into the pot, dried herbs that immediately release a savoury aroma. Not just for flavour, many herbs have preservative properties that help prevent food spoilage, crucial when refrigeration doesn't exist. One of the middle children, a boy of perhaps 7, has been coughing intermittently. The grandmother notices and retrieves another small pouch, this one containing what looks like dried leaves. She drops a pinch into a cup, adds hot water from the pot near the fire, and hands it to the boy. Medieval medicine? you guess. Herbs weren't just for cooking. That simple tea might contain thyme, antiseptic properties, elderberry, immune support, or any number of local plants with medicinal uses. Modern pharmaceuticals are isolated versions of compounds these people were already using, albeit less precisely. The boy makes a face at the bitter taste, but drinks obediently. Getting sick in winter could be a death sentence. Everyone knows this, even the children. As the family gathers for the midday meal, you notice something else, their rotating positions. Those who sat closest to the fire this morning now move to outer spots, allowing others to take the warmest places. It's an unspoken system of heat sharing that ensures everyone gets time in the warmest spots. The stew is distributed in wooden bowls, with slightly larger portions going to the father, who returned briefly for the meal, and the oldest children. Those who burn more calories get more fuel. Simple survival math. No one complains about the distribution. This isn't unfairness, it's efficiency. They're going to need bread with that, right? You think, looking for the standard medieval accompaniment. But bread is surprisingly absent. Baking requires significant fuel for heating an oven, a luxury reserved for perhaps once a week, not daily consumption. The dense porridge and stew provide calories more efficiently. After the meal, the father returns to outside work, while the mother and older children prepare for one of the day's most important tasks, water collection. In deep winter, this means breaking ice on a nearby stream or melting snow. Either way, it's dangerous, cold work that can't be avoided. Water is non-negotiable for survival. Two of the children grab wooden buckets and follow their mother outside, wrapped in every available layer. The youngest children stay with the grandmother, who immediately puts them to work sorting beans, removing any damaged ones from what might be seed stock for spring planting. You're struck by how there's no idleness. Every moment contains purpose. Every action serves survival. Yet it doesn't feel frantic or desperate. Just methodical and necessary. With fewer people in the hut, the grandmother banks the fire slightly, preserving precious wood. She notices your interest and gestures for you to come closer. She points to the fire, then to different sections of wood stacked nearby, clearly wanting to explain something. Fire management, you guess? She nods as if understanding and selects a piece of wood from one pile. Dense, heavy oak. Then she points to the flames, holds up her hand, and slowly closes it partially. The message is clear. This wood burns slowly, providing steady heat for longer periods. She selects another piece, lighter, perhaps pine, and mimics flames growing quickly. Different woods for different needs, you say, nodding. She's showing you how medieval people didn't just burn whatever they found. They understood which woods burned hot and fast, good for cooking, which burned slow and steady, good for overnight heating, and how to combine them for specific purposes. The youngest boy tugs at your sleeve and points to the corner where several rounded stones sit near the fire. He pantomimes picking one up, carefully wrapping it in cloth and putting it in a bed. Bed warmers, simple technology but effective. Stones heated by the fire, wrapped in cloth and placed under bedding would radiate heat for hours. You guys have thought of everything, haven't you? You say, impressed by the ingenuity. The boy grins, clearly enjoying playing teacher to this strange adult who seems to know nothing about basic survival. He leads you to another corner of the hut where bundles of dried plants hang from the ceiling beams. Some you recognize, lavender, rosemary, sage, while others are unfamiliar. These weren't just for cooking and medicine. Many aromatic herbs repel insects and mask less pleasant smells. Some were added to fires at night to create smoke that deterred pests while making the close quarters more bearable. Medieval aromatherapy that served multiple practical purposes. The door opens, bringing a swirl of cold air and the returning water collectors. The mother and children stamp snow from their feet and quickly close the door. Their cheeks are red with cold, but they've succeeded. The wooden buckets are full of snow that will melt by the fire to become drinking and cooking water. God, that looks miserable, you think, watching them peel off outer layers stiff with ice. The mother's hands are red and chapped from exposure. No waterproof gloves in this century. Wool offers some protection, but gets soaked easily. One thing medieval people understood well was the danger of getting wet in winter. The mother immediately spreads the damp outer garments near the fire, not too close to prevent burning, but close enough to dry before they're needed again. The afternoon light is already fading, though it's only mid-afternoon. Winter days are short and darkness brings new challenges. The grandmother moves with increased purpose now, preparing for evening. She sends the oldest girl to check on the chickens in their corner. The birds have been mostly quiet during the day, but they'll need to be settled properly for the night to maximize their heat contribution. You notice the girl adding something to the chicken bedding, more dried herbs different from the cooking varieties. These have a sharper smell. Pest control, you realise. Chickens are prone to mites and lice, which can devastate a small flock. The herbs help keep the parasites at bay without harming the valuable birds. The mother is now preparing the evening meal, another pot of porridge, but this one mixed with dried peas for additional protein. The fire is built up slightly, producing more heat as the coldest hours approach. You realise how precisely they manage the flames, like adjusting a thermostat, but requiring far more skill and attention. I would have died on day one, you mutter, watching the careful calibration of fuel to heat output. The middle boy, who's been coughing, looks worse now. His face is flushed and he moves sluggishly. The grandmother notices immediately and leads him to a spot close to the fire. She places her wrinkled hand on his forehead, frowning at the heat she feels there. Winter illness was a serious threat. With no antibiotics and limited understanding of disease transmission, even minor infections could become deadly. The grandmother reaches for her herb collection again, selecting different leaves this time. She crushes them between her fingers, releasing a sharp medicinal smell before steeping them in hot water. The mother watches with concern, but doesn't hover. There's still work to be done, mouths to feed. She can't stop everything for one sick child, no matter how worried she might be. This practical approach to crisis isn't heartlessness, it's survival. As daylight fades completely, the father returns, bringing with him an armload of freshly cut wood. He's exhausted, his breath coming in white clouds, but his first action is to check on the sick boy. He lays a rough hand gently on the child's head, eyes meeting his wife's in silent communication. He needs more blankets, the father says, or would if you could understand him. The mother nods and retrieves something from a storage chest, a small fur, perhaps rabbit saved for emergencies. She tucks it around the boy, who's now shivering despite the fever and nearby fire. The gravity of the situation hits you. This isn't just discomfort or inconvenience. Winter illness in medieval times often meant death, especially for children. The family's concern is palpable, but so is their resilience. They've faced this before and have systems in place. The herbs, the carefully preserved fur, the prime spot by the fire. The father hangs his snow-covered outer garments on pegs near the door, as far from the fire as possible. Melting snow near the heat source would create unwanted humidity in the already damp hut. It's another small but significant detail in their winter survival strategy. He sits heavily on a wooden stool, clearly bone-tired from a day of physical labour in freezing conditions. The grandmother hands him a steaming cup. Not just water, you notice, but something herbal, an energy restorative perhaps, or something to prevent the illness that's taken hold of his son. The oldest daughter moves to her father and begins unwrapping the cloth strips from his legs. They're damp with sweat and melted snow, dangerous to leave on as temperatures drop for the night. She sets them near the fire to dry and helps him put on dry replacements. This isn't babying a grown man, it's survival assistance for someone too exhausted to properly care for himself after ensuring the family's needs were met. "Daddy, look what I found," the youngest girl suddenly exclaims, or something similar in their language. She's been remarkably quiet until now, but her excitement breaks through as she pulls something from a pocket in her dress. It's a feather, brilliantly blue, probably from a jay. A small thing, but in the monotonous grey-brown-white palette of winter, it's a burst of vibrant colour. The father's tired face breaks into a genuine smile as he accepts the treasure. He says something that makes the girl beam with pride. Even in the grueling existence of medieval winter, there's room for joy, for appreciating beauty. The feather is carefully placed on a small shelf with other found objects: a smooth stone, an unusually shaped piece of wood, a dried flower, a family museum of simple wonders. The evening meal is served as darkness fully envelops the world outside. The family gathers close to the fire, not just for warmth but for light. The flames provide the only illumination besides a small rush lamp, a simple clay dish filled with animal fat with a wick of twisted plant fibers. Lighting was precious in winter. The rush lamp produces dim, smoky light and an unpleasant smell, but it's used sparingly and only when necessary. Most activities were designed to be done by firelight alone or from memory in near darkness. As they eat, the father tells a story. You can't understand the words, but his gestures and tone make it clear he's recounting something dramatic, perhaps a folk tale or family history. The children watch with wide eyes, momentarily distracted from the sick brother and the perpetual cold. Entertainment when Netflix isn't an option, you think, watching their rapt faces. Storytelling wasn't just pastime, it was cultural preservation, education, and community building all at once. Stories got families through long winter nights for centuries before electric lights and digital screens. After the meal, preparations for night begin in earnest. The sun set hours ago, but true bedtime approaches only now. The father adds specific woods to the fire, larger pieces that will burn slowly through the first part of the night. The mother arranges bedding, ensuring the sick boy has the warmest spot without being too close to the fire. The grandmother is preparing something at the edge of the hearth, heating stones that will go into the bedding. She's carefully selected rounded stones with no cracks that might expand and break when heated. She tests each one with a drop of water. If it sizzles too violently, the stone is too hot and might burn the bedding. This isn't casual work, it's precision engineering with the simplest materials. The chickens are settled in their corner, huddled together for warmth. The goat has been brought inside now that temperatures are plummeting. It protests briefly at being tethered in its designated area, but soon settles on the straw bedding prepared for it. Each family member has specific night preparations. The oldest girl checks that all outside garments are properly positioned to dry overnight. The middle children ensure water is available, a critical resource if someone wakes thirsty in the night. The youngest help spread fresh rushes on areas of the floor that have become damp or dirty during the day. The grandmother is now preparing something special, a warm drink for everyone before bed. It smells sweet and herbal, perhaps containing honey saved from summer. This isn't just comfort. Many herbs promote sleep and relaxation, critical for proper rest during the stressful winter months. As the family settles for the night, they don't simply lie down and expect sleep to come. There's a rhythm to their bedtime routine, a careful choreography developed over generations of winter survival. The father banks the fire, not extinguishing it, but carefully covering hot coals with ash to slow the burn rate while preserving the heat source. It's a delicate balance, and he takes his time getting it exactly right. Too much ash will smother the coals, too little will let them burn too quickly. Done perfectly, the banked fire will maintain minimal heat through the first sleep period. Each person puts on sleep caps if they weren't already wearing them. Some wrap additional cloth around their necks or over their mouths and noses, breathing warmers that capture exhaled heat and use it to warm incoming cold air. The mother checks each child one last time, tucking bedding around them to eliminate drafts. She pays special attention to the sick boy, whose coughing has settled somewhat but whose forehead still radiates heat. You watch as the family arranges themselves in their sleeping spots, children in the lofts near the ceiling where the warmest air collects, parents and grandmother on the floor where they can tend the fire during night wakings. They don't simply lie down randomly, they position themselves to maximize the benefit of every available heat source. "Good night," the father says, or whatever the medieval equivalent might be. One by one, the family members settle into their bedding, creating small nests of relative warmth in the increasingly cold hut. Outside, the temperature continues to drop as full night takes hold. Wind whistles occasionally through tiny gaps in the walls, but the structure holds firm against winter's assault. Inside, the fire glows dimly beneath its blanket of ash, waiting to be revived during the middle-night waking that will come in a few hours. As the family drifts toward their first sleep of the night, you're struck by the immense knowledge embedded in their simple actions. Every movement, every decision reflects generations of accumulated wisdom about surviving winter with minimal resources. These weren't people blindly enduring hardship. They were skilled practitioners of survival arts that most modern humans have completely forgotten. The complex heating system, the strategic use of every material, the careful management of resources, all of it speaks to sophistication rather than primitiveness. The last thing you notice before the hut falls silent is the sick boy reaching for his mother's hand in the darkness. She squeezes it gently, a timeless gesture of comfort that bridges the centuries between their world and yours. Some things, at least, remain unchanged by time. You drift off as well, lulled by the rhythmic breathing of the sleeping family and the occasional soft pop from the banked fire. The hut is never truly dark. The covered embers provide a dull orange glow that casts long shadows across the walls. It's not peaceful silence like modern sleep. There's the constant rustle of straw as people shift position, the occasional cough from the sick boy, and the soft sounds of animals in their corner. It feels like only minutes have passed when your eyes open again. Something has changed in the hut. The fire has dimmed further, and the temperature has dropped noticeably. Your breath forms thicker clouds now. Outside, the wind has picked up, whistling through the thatch and making the walls creak slightly. What woke you was movement. The father is sitting up, fully alert, despite having been deeply asleep moments ago. The grandmother too is awake, moving with purpose in the near darkness. No one lit a lamp or spoke a word, yet they've risen in perfect synchrony. This is what you heard about earlier, the middle night waking. Medieval people didn't sleep straight through from dusk to dawn. Instead, they broke their sleep into two distinct periods with an hour or two of wakefulness between them. The father stands, stretches briefly, and moves directly to the fire. He carefully scrapes back the layer of ash covering the embers, revealing the glowing heart of the banked fire. With practiced movements, he adds small pieces of kindling, then cups his hands and blows gently on the coals. The embers brighten immediately, and tiny flames begin to dance among the new fuel. What's wild is how alert he seems. This isn't a groggy, middle-of-the-night bathroom trip. He's fully functional, moving with purpose and precision. The grandmother is the same, checking first on the sick boy before moving to the animals in their corner, so they just wake up like this. On purpose, you wonder. It seems so contrary to modern ideas about uninterrupted sleep. The mother stirs now too, rising without hesitation or confusion. She immediately goes to her sick son, feeling his forehead with the back of her hand. Her face tightens with worry. The boy's fever hasn't broken. She exchanges glances with the grandmother, who nods and moves to her collection of dried herbs. You realise this middle-night waking isn't just a quirk of medieval sleep patterns. It's a critical survival mechanism. The fire would have died completely by morning without this tending. The sick child might have worsened beyond help without this check. The coldest hours of the night are the most dangerous, and having everyone unconscious through them would be a deadly risk. The father has built the fire back to moderate strength now, careful not to make it too large and waste precious fuel, but sufficient to reheat the hut. The temperature difference is already noticeable, not warm by any means, but no longer dangerously cold. The grandmother is brewing something for the sick boy, a different mixture than the earlier medicine, this one giving off a sharp, minty smell that cuts through the smoky air. Medieval pharmacology had distinct day and night treatments, each targeting different symptoms or bodily systems. The middle children remain asleep in their lofts, but the oldest girl is awake now too, moving to help her mother with the sick brother. Together they raise his upper body, supporting him as the grandmother brings the herbal drink. The boy is barely conscious, his eyes glassy with fever, but they manage to get some of the liquid into him. They're so calm, you think, watching their methodical care. There's worry in their faces, certainly, but no panic. They've faced winter illness before and have protocols in place. Specific treatments for specific hours of the night, roles assigned and understood without discussion. The father checks the door, ensuring it's securely latched against the rising wind. He makes small adjustments to items hanging to dry, moving some closer to the refreshed fire and repositioning others that have dried sufficiently. Nothing is left to chance or overlooked. What's most striking is how this wakeful period feels entirely normal to them. This isn't insomnia or interrupted sleep in the modern sense. It's an intentional, expected part of their night, built into their understanding of how human bodies work. The mother uses this time to rearrange the sleeping furs and blankets around her sick son, creating a better cocoon of warmth. She unwraps a small bundle kept by the fire, what looks like stones wrapped in cloth, and tucks them around his body. These bed warmers, heated earlier in the evening and now reheated during the midnight waking, will help fight the fever by keeping his body at a steady temperature. So wait, you want to ask them, is this normal, waking up in the middle of the night like this? The answer, if they could give it, would surprise most modern people. Before artificial lighting extended days and changed sleep patterns, this biphasic or segmented sleep was likely the natural human norm. The pattern emerged not just from necessity but from the body's natural rhythms when aligned with darkness and light. While the adults work, you notice something about their movements. They're all wearing additional clothing compared to daytime. Sleep caps cover their heads, tight-fitting wool that prevents heat loss through the scalp. Some have cloth wrapped around their necks as well, preventing warm air from escaping upward. The father's hands are covered too, not with bulky gloves that would make fire tending difficult, but with fitted mittens that leave his thumbs free for dexterity. Medieval people understood that extremities, hands, feet, ears, lost heat rapidly and could make the entire body feel cold, even if the core remained warm. The grandmother is now checking the animals. She places fresh feed for the chickens, who stir sleepily at her approach. The goat receives a quick check of its tether and a handful of dried grasses. These animals aren't just passive heat sources. They require care and maintenance to continue providing their warming benefits. Or weird chicken feeding time, you think, but there's method to this too. The fresh food stimulates the animal's metabolism, causing them to generate more body heat during the coldest part of the night. It's like adding fuel to a living furnace. The father has completed his fire maintenance and now moves around the hut's perimeter, checking for drafts. He pauses at one spot where the wind seems to be finding entry, takes a handful of straw mixed with clay from a container near the door and presses it into the gap. Draft proofing was an ongoing winter battle, with new leaks appearing as structures shifted in freezing and thawing cycles. What's fascinating is how this middle night period creates a different kind of consciousness, not the full alertness of day, nor the deep unconsciousness of sleep, but something in between, a liminal state where essential tasks get done while the mind remains partly in dream space. The mother finishes tending to her sick son and sits by the fire, picking up some mending work she set aside earlier. The quiet hours of middle night were often used for small, simple tasks that required minimal light, repairs to clothing, simple crafts, or food preparation for the coming day. The father joins her, not speaking but clearly comfortable in the shared silence. He takes out a small knife and a piece of wood, working on what might become another toy, or perhaps a replacement handle for a tool. The soft scrape of the blade against wood joins the quiet symphony of night sounds, the fire's crackle, sleeping breaths, and the wind outside. The grandmother has completed her rounds and now settles near the sick boy, watching his sleep with the focused attention of someone who has nursed many through winter illness. Her gnarled hands hold a strand of beads, perhaps a rosary or some other focus for prayers or meditation. Medieval night wakings often had spiritual dimensions as well as practical ones. So what are they actually doing with this time, you wonder, watching the quiet industry around you? Research suggests this middle night waking served multiple purposes beyond fire tending. It was time for reflection, for processing the day's events or the content of first sleep dreams. Some historians believe it was an important time for memory consolidation and problem solving, the brain working through challenges in this unique state of consciousness. It was also essential social time. In the crowded, busy daylight hours, deep conversation might be impossible, but in the quiet intimacy of middle night, with most children asleep and work set aside, adults could speak of matters too private or complex for daytime discussion. As if confirming your thoughts, the mother and father begin a quiet conversation. Their voices are low, barely audible, but their serious expressions suggest important matters, perhaps concerns about the sick child, plans for stretching winter supplies, or decisions about spring planting. This wasn't idle chat, but essential family governance happening in the only time available for it. The oldest girl has completed her tasks and now sits with her grandmother, listening as the older woman shows her something about the medicinal herbs. Knowledge transfer happened in these moments, critical survival skills passed from generation to generation, in the quiet hours when younger children slept and distractions were minimal. About an hour has passed in this middle night activity when you notice the first signs of transition. The father yawns widely, stretches, and begins preparing for second sleep. He banks the fire again, though not as deeply as earlier. The coldest part of the night is still ahead, and more heat will be needed until dawn. The mother follows suit, checking once more on her sick son before returning to her sleeping place. The grandmother is the last to settle, after placing one more warmed stone near the sick boy. One by one, they wrap themselves in their bedding, adjust their sleeping caps, and position themselves for the second sleep period. What's remarkable is how natural the transition appears. There's no tossing and turning, no struggle to return to sleep as modern insomniacs might experience. They slip back into sleep with the ease of people following their body's natural rhythms rather than fighting against them. And yet, not everyone returns to sleep. The grandmother remains awake, settling into what appears to be a watch position near the sick child. In families with serious illness, night watches would rotate, ensuring someone was always alert to changes in condition or needs for additional care. Before she fully settled, the grandmother did something you didn't notice earlier. She shifted her position slightly, moving to where the father had been sleeping previously. This wasn't random. That spot had been warmed by his body heat and would stay comfortable longer than an unused section of floor. Heat mapping, the strategic use of body warmth, was another survival technique. Family members would sometimes rotate positions during the night, each taking advantage of the residual warmth left by others. Nothing was wasted, not even the heat generated by sleeping bodies. Outside, the night has deepened. The wind has settled somewhat, but the temperature continues to drop. This is the true test of all those survival systems. The hours before dawn, when cold reaches its peak and bodies are at their most vulnerable. The sick boy coughs in his sleep, a harsh sound that immediately brings his grandmother's full attention. She places a gentle hand on his chest, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing, then adjusts his coverings again. The depth of care is evident in every movement. This isn't clinical or detached, but deeply personal. You drift towards sleep yourself, lulled by the renewed quiet of the hut. The fire pops occasionally as a particularly resinous piece of wood heats, and somewhere in the distance an owl calls, a hunter taking advantage of the deep night. Your modern mind struggles to fully comprehend this medieval relationship with night and sleep. We think of sleep as a single block of time, interrupted only by problems or disturbances. But for most of human history, this segmented pattern was normal, perhaps even optimal for the human brain and body. The second sleep period feels different from the first, deeper somehow, more restful. Modern research suggests this biphasic pattern might actually offer better quality rest than the consolidated 8 hours we now consider ideal. The middle night waking allowed for hormone regulation, stress processing, and a kind of mental reset before the second sleep cycle. Hours pass in this deepened sleep state. The hut grows colder as the night approaches its darkest point, but the family's systems hold against the chill, the banked fire maintaining minimal heat, the layered bedding trapping body warmth, the sleeping bodies generating their own heat beneath caps and wrappings. You're awakened again by movement, less organized this time, more urgent. The quality of darkness has changed. It's still night, but somehow different. The deep black has shifted to a dark blue that suggests the earliest approach of dawn, though sunrise itself is still hours away. The grandmother is standing, moving quickly to the sick boy's side. The child is thrashing in his blankets, caught in the grip of a fever spike. His face is flushed, his breathing rapid. This is the crisis point that often comes in the coldest hours before dawn, when the body's resources are most depleted. The mother wakes instantly at the grandmother's soft call. She moves to her son without hesitation, her face tight with worry but her movements confident. Together, the women unwrap the outer layers of the boy's bedding, counterintuitive in the freezing cold, but necessary to bring down his dangerous fever. The father wakes next, immediately moving to rebuild the fire. More heat is needed now, not for comfort, but to boil water for the stronger medicines this crisis requires. His movements are swift but controlled. This isn't their first experience with night fever. Even in crisis, there's no wasted energy, no panic. Each person has a role, understood without discussion. The mother supports the boy's head and shoulders, helping him drink small sips of water. The grandmother prepares herbs with shaking hands, not from uncertainty, but from age and the cold. The father maintains the fire at precisely the right strength for the medicine preparation. The oldest girl wakes and immediately moves to care for the younger children, who have begun to stir at the unusual activity. She gathers them in the furthest corner of the loft, telling them a quiet story to keep them calm and out of the way of the urgent care below. You're witnessing medieval crisis management at its most efficient, a family unit functioning as a single organism, each part performing its essential role without hesitation or confusion. There's fear in their eyes, certainly. Winter fever killed countless children before modern medicine, but there's also determination and deep knowledge. The grandmother has prepared something different now, a poultice of herbs mixed with rendered animal fat. She spreads this on a cloth and places it on the boy's chest, then wraps him again, but less heavily than before. The sharp smell suggests mustard or another warming herb that will draw heat to the surface and away from his core. Fever management was sophisticated even without thermometers or modern understanding of infection. They couldn't name the bacteria or viruses, but generations of observation had taught them which symptoms responded to which treatments, when to warm and when to cool, which herbs fought infection and which reduced inflammation. "Come on, little guy," you whisper, caught up in the drama despite yourself. The family's concern is contagious, their focused care drawing you into their circle of worry and hope. The boy's breathing eases slightly as the poultice does its work. The violent thrashing calms to occasional restless movements. The mother strokes his forehead, singing a soft, repetitive melody that might be a lullaby or a prayer. In this world, the two were often indistinguishable. Outside, the first birds have begun their pre-dawn chorus, though the sky remains dark. This twilight period before true dawn has its own character, not quite night anymore, but not yet day. The family marks this transition with subtle shifts in their activities. The crisis appears to be passing as the night itself wanes. The father adds more substantial wood to the fire, building it higher than it's been all night. Morning fire serves different purposes: cooking, heating water for the day's needs, driving out the deep chill that has settled into every corner during the long darkness. The grandmother checks the sick boy once more, her expression softening slightly. She nods to the mother, a good sign, a message of cautious hope. The worst has passed, at least for now. The boy sleeps more peacefully, his breathing deeper and more regular. The mother looks exhausted but relieved. She hasn't slept since the crisis began, maintaining her vigil through the darkest hours. Now, as the first hint of grey lightens the eastern sky, she allows herself to slump slightly, the immediate danger past. They made it, you think, surprised by your own emotional investment in this family you've known for less than a day. But survival was always communal in this world. One person's crisis affected everyone, one person's skills benefited all. The interconnectedness was both practical and deeply human. As true dawn approaches, the hut begins its daily transformation. The fire burns brighter, pushing back the night's deep chill. The animals stir in their corner, the chickens beginning their morning sounds, the goat shifting on its straw bed. The younger children climb down from the loft, moving automatically to the warmest spots near the now blazing fire. The grandmother begins breakfast preparation, her movements slower than the previous day but no less precise. The crisis has taken a toll on her aging body, but her role doesn't allow for rest yet. The porridge must be made, the day's water heated, the fire maintained at the right strength for morning needs. The The father prepares for another day outside. The animals must be tended, wood gathered, repairs made. Winter doesn't pause for illness or exhaustion. The survival cycle continues regardless of what transpired in the night. The oldest girl has taken over care of the sick boy, allowing her mother a brief rest before the day's work begins in earnest. She changes the poultice with practiced movements, her young face serious with responsibility. This too is part of her education, learning to care for the ill, to recognize signs of improvement or decline, to prepare the remedies her grandmother has taught her. And so the medieval day begins again, shaped by the cold, defined by survival needs, but rich with human connection and accumulated wisdom. Another day of winter to endure, another night to prepare for, another link in the long chain of survival that stretches from these people to you, centuries later in your warm, electrically heated home. The sick boy opens his eyes briefly, looking directly at you with a gaze that seems to bridge the centuries. There's recognition there, acknowledgement of shared humanity, despite the vast differences in your lives and worlds. Then his eyes close again as he drifts back to healing sleep, surrounded by the family whose knowledge and care might just see him through to spring. Morning brings a different quality of light to the hut, thin and grey, filtering through the oiled parchment coverings on the small windows. Outside, fresh snow has fallen during the night, muffling sounds and creating that peculiar winter silence where each noise stands out with crystalline clarity. The sick boy is sleeping more peacefully now, his fever having broken sometime in the pre-dawn hours. The grandmother sits beside him, her own eyes closed in a brief moment of rest after the night's crisis. Her hands resting on her lap are a map of years, knuckles swollen from arthritis, skin thinned and spotted with age, yet still capable of the precise work of healing. Did anyone actually get any sleep last night, you wonder, watching the family move through their morning routines with heavy eyes and slower movements? The crisis has depleted their energy reserves, but the work of survival doesn't pause for recovery. The father eats his morning porridge standing up, already dressed for outside work. His face shows the strain of interrupted sleep, but there's no complaint, no mention of exhaustion. When every winter day is a battle against the elements, personal discomfort becomes background noise. Acknowledged, but not dwelled upon. "I'll check if Thomas can spare some honey," he says to his wife, or something similar in their medieval language, "for the boy." She nods gratefully. Honey wasn't just a sweetener in medieval times, it was medicine, particularly effective for respiratory illnesses. Its antibacterial properties, though not understood in those terms, had been observed for centuries, but honey in deep winter was a precious resource, saved for special needs or traded at high value. Thomas? Who's Thomas, you wonder? You're about to find out. The father finishes his meal quickly and heads for the door, pausing only to check on his son and exchange a few quiet words with the grandmother. Then he's gone, taking with him a small cloth bundle, likely something to trade for the honey. The mother moves to the fire, adding the morning's water to be heated. The oldest girl has taken over breakfast distribution, ladling porridge into wooden bowls for her younger siblings. There's a rhythm to their movements, a choreography of survival that continues regardless of circumstance. A sharp knock at the door breaks the quiet routine. The mother straightens, wiping her hands on her apron before moving to answer it. The door opens to reveal a woman of similar age, wrapped in multiple layers against the cold. Her cheeks are red from the short walk between huts, her breath clouding in the freezing air. "Sarah," the mother says, or whatever name would have been common in their time and place. The women embrace briefly before the visitor is ushered inside. The door quickly closed against the cold. The visitor immediately notices the sick boy and moves toward him, her face creased with concern. She exchanges words with the grandmother, who nods wearily and makes room for the newcomer to check the child herself. What you're witnessing isn't just a neighbourly visit. In medieval villages, certain women became known for their healing skills, not formal midwives or physicians, but respected community healers whose knowledge supplemented each family's basic medical abilities. This woman appears to be one such person, her confident assessment of the boy suggesting experience with winter illnesses. She reaches into a small bag hanging at her waist and pulls out a bundle of dried herbs different from those the grandmother has been using. The two women confer, comparing approaches, combining knowledge. There's no competition here, just collaboration toward the shared goal of the child's recovery. "I told my Jacob to help your man with the north fence," the visitor says to the mother. Again, not the exact words, but the meaning is clear from her gestures and the mother's grateful nod. This is medieval community in action. Word of the family's crisis has spread and help has materialized. Not just medical knowledge, but practical assistance with the father's daily tasks, ensuring survival work continues while the family manages the illness. The visitor doesn't stay long. She has her own household to run, but her brief presence has changed the atmosphere in the hut. The shared burden feels lighter, the mother's face less strained, the grandmother more confident in her treatments now that they've been confirmed by another knowledgeable woman. As the visitor departs, she leaves behind the bundle of herbs and something else, a small clay pot that the mother receives with obvious gratitude. Honey, perhaps, or another remedy too precious to be spared without serious need. Well, that was nice of her, you think, watching the door close behind the departing neighbour. But this wasn't mere niceness. In medieval winter, community cooperation wasn't optional. It was essential survival strategy. Today your child is sick. Tomorrow it might be your neighbour's. The shared knowledge and resources created resilience no single family could achieve alone. The oldest girl has taken the younger children outside for their morning toilet needs, a cold but necessary journey to the household's designated waste area, likely a simple pit latrine at a sensible distance from the hut. Modern bathroom privacy is a luxury these people never expected, especially in winter when speed and efficiency trumped modesty. With the children momentarily absent, the mother and grandmother prepare a fresh treatment for the sick boy. The new herbs are crushed and steeped in hot water, creating a tea that smells sharply medicinal. The grandmother supports the boy's head, while the mother helps him drink the bitter liquid. He grimaces but swallows obediently. Even young children understood the seriousness of winter illness. The hut is warming now as the morning fire reaches full strength. It's still cold by modern standards. You'd probably set your thermostat around 50 degrees if you were trying to replicate this temperature. But after the deep chill of night, it feels almost comfortable. A different visitor arrives, an older man, stooped with age but still moving with purpose. He stamps snow from his feet before entering, bringing with him the smell of wood smoke from a different fire and the sharp winter air. The grandfather, perhaps, or an elder from another household. His visit has a different purpose. He speaks to the mother while looking at the ceiling beams, gesturing upward with concerns evident in his expression. She nods, pointing to areas where the thatch seems thinner or the supporting structure shows signs of strain. Winter brought structural challenges to medieval homes. Snow weight could collapse poorly maintained roofs. Freeze-thaw cycles could weaken daub walls. This elder appears to be conducting an assessment, sharing his experience of building maintenance to prevent disaster. His careful examination of the roof structure and walls is another form of community support. Early intervention could prevent catastrophic failure during the worst of winter. "I'll send the boys tomorrow," he tells the mother, making what seems to be a promise of labour help. Roof repairs, even minor ones, weren't one-person jobs, and with the father focused on his sick son and essential daily tasks, the community steps in to fill the gap. The older man accepts a small cup of something hot, likely not the precious herbs saved for the sick child, but perhaps a tea made from pine needles. Such teas provided vitamin C and other nutrients crucial for winter health, staving off scurvy and boosting immune systems taxed by cold and limited diet. Before leaving, the elder pauses by the sick boy, placing a weathered hand gently on his forehead in what might be a blessing or simply a grandfatherly gesture of concern. These momentary connections, small touches, brief visits, shared knowledge, formed the social fabric that made survival possible. As the morning progresses, the mother begins preparations for the midday meal. She retrieves items from various storage containers around the hut: dried beans that have been soaking since yesterday, preserved vegetables from underground storage, a small piece of salted meat for flavour. Medieval food preservation was sophisticated out of necessity. Nothing edible could be wasted, and summer's abundance had to stretch through winter's scarcity. The vegetables, likely turnips, carrots, and cabbage, had been stored in straw-lined pits that stayed just above freezing. The technique kept them edible, if somewhat shriveled, for months. The meat came from fall slaughtering, preserved through smoking and salting. Fresh meat in deep winter was rare unless a hunt was successful, which became increasingly unlikely as wild animals struggled with their own winter survival. Most protein now came from preserved sources: smoked meats, dried fish, aged cheese if the family was fortunate enough to have milk-producing animals. The grandmother has rallied somewhat after her brief rest and now supervises the youngest children, who have returned from their outdoor expedition red-cheeked and hungry. She sets them to simple tasks: sorting beans, breaking preserved vegetables into pot-sized pieces that keep them occupied while contributing to the household work. The sick boy stirs again, more alert than earlier. The mother immediately moves to his side, helping him sit up slightly to drink some of the clear broth she skimmed from the cooking pot. Maintaining hydration was crucial for fever recovery, and even weak broth provided both liquid and nutrients. "Or mama," he says, a word recognizable in almost any language, especially when spoken by a child seeking comfort. The mother smooths his hair back from his forehead, murmuring reassurances as she checks his temperature with her lips pressed to his skin, a method mothers have used across centuries to gauge fever. The door opens again, bringing a swirl of cold air and the father's return. His arms are full of firewood, and something hangs from his belt: a pair of rabbits, their fur white with winter camouflage. The successful hunt brings a change to the family's energy. Fresh meat in winter was both nutrition and celebration. Jacob spotted them near the old oak, the father explains as he hands the rabbits to his wife. The community support has paid dividends beyond the immediate help with tasks. Extra eyes in the forest meant better hunting chances, and by custom, successful hunters shared information about game sightings with others. The father moves immediately to check on his son, relief visible in his face when he sees the boy awake and somewhat improved. He produces something from his pocket, a small clay pot that must contain the honey he sought from Thomas. The grandmother receives it with a nod of approval, immediately incorporating some into the next dose of herbal medicine. The atmosphere in the hut has shifted with the father's return and the boy's improvement. There's a cautious optimism now, a sense that the crisis is passing. The rabbits represent unexpected bounty, the honey a specific medicine for the child's recovery, and the continued community support a buffer against winter's hardships. The mother hands the rabbits to her oldest daughter, who takes them outside for the initial preparation. Butchering was not segregated from children's awareness in medieval life. Even young ones understood where food came from and often participated in its preparation from earliest ages. The girl will remove the fur saved for small projects, clean the carcasses, and preserve any parts not used for immediate cooking. Nothing would be wasted. The blood would be collected for sausage or pudding, the organs eaten first as they spoiled quickest, the bones saved for broth, and even the sinew kept for thread or binding material. The fur would become mittens or hat lining, or perhaps a comfort item for the smallest child. The midday meal preparation continues with the prospect of fresh meat adding variety to the planned stew. The mother adjusts her cooking accordingly, setting aside a portion of the rabbit meat to be preserved for future meals. Even in relative bounty, the medieval mind stayed focused on future scarcity. More village children appear at the door, friends of the older children coming to check on the sick boy and perhaps hoping for tasks that might earn them a taste of the rabbit stew. The mother sends them on small errands, bringing a bucket of snow to melt for water, carrying a message to another household, helping the oldest daughter with the rabbits. These children move through the winter landscape with confident familiarity. They know which paths stay passable after snowfall, which icicles indicate roof leaks that might weaken structures, which smoke patterns from chimneys suggest households needing assistance. Their environmental literacy is instinctive, absorbed through observation rather than formal teaching. As midday approaches, the hut fills with savoury smells that make even the sick boy perk up slightly. The stew bubbles at the edge of the fire, vegetables softening and flavours melding. The grandmother has prepared a special portion for the sick child, mostly broth with tiny bits of meat, the most digestible combination for someone recovering from fever. The father has been making repairs to a wooden tool, perhaps a shovel or hoe, replacing a cracked handle with a piece of seasoned wood he's been saving for this purpose. The work keeps him near the fire and his sick son while still accomplishing necessary maintenance. Medieval winter was repair season. Time to fix everything that would be needed when spring's work began in earnest. The youngest children have been playing a simple game with pebbles and a marked piece of leather, something like modern tic-tac-toe, but with different rules. Their laughter provides counterpoint to the serious work of survival, a reminder that even in hardship, humanity finds space for play and joy. The midday meal is served as the weak winter sun reaches its highest point, still pitifully low in the northern sky, providing minimal warmth but crucial psychological comfort with its light. The family gathers around the fire, each accepting their portion with murmured thanks or silent nods. The sick boy manages a few spoonfuls of broth and tiny bites of rabbit before tiring. It's a good sign. Appetite returning suggests recovery beginning, but he's still weak from the night's fever. The grandmother helps him lie back down, tucking the bedding around him with practiced care. Conversation during the meal is minimal. Practical exchanges about afternoon tasks, updates on the roof concerns, plans for using the rabbit remains. Medieval mealtimes weren't dominated by social chatter, as modern ones often are. Food was fuel, eating was necessary work, and conversation served specific purposes rather than entertainment. After eating, the father prepares to return outside. There's still daylight and essential tasks remain, checking animal shelters, gathering more firewood, perhaps setting snares in hopes of additional game. Winter days were short and every moment of light had to be used efficiently. Before leaving, he confers briefly with his wife and mother-in-law. Their faces are serious as they discuss what appears to be a change in plans. The boy's illness has disrupted normal patterns, requiring redistribution of tasks. The mother will now handle some outdoor work, normally done by the father, allowing him to focus on heavier labor while she remains closer to the hut and her sick child. This flexibility was essential to medieval survival. Rigid gender roles existed in many contexts, but winter crisis demanded practical adaptations. When survival hung in the balance, capability trumped convention. The mother is clearly experienced with the outdoor tasks she's taking on, suggesting this isn't the first time such adjustments have been necessary. As the father leaves again, the grandmother oversees the meal cleanup, a simple process of scraping bowls clean and returning them to their storage shelf. The cooking pot remains at the fire's edge, the remaining stew continuing to simmer for the evening meal. The oldest daughter takes the used bowls outside to scour them with snow, an efficient cleaning method that required no precious heated water. The hut settles into afternoon rhythm. The grandmother returns to her spinning, the younger children to quiet play or simple tasks. The sick boy drifts between sleep and wakefulness, each period of alertness slightly longer than the last, another good sign. The mother prepares for her outdoor tasks, layering additional clothing and wrapping her legs and feet carefully. Proper preparation for cold exposure was essential knowledge. The difference between discomfort and dangerous frostbite often came down to how garments were layered and secured. "I'll be just behind the storage shed," she tells the grandmother, or words to that effect. "Send Marta if he worsens." Marta must be the oldest daughter, currently feeding kitchen scraps to the chickens in their corner. The mother's outdoor work will keep her within earshot of the hut, close enough to return quickly if needed, but far enough to accomplish necessary tasks. This balance of responsibility was constant in medieval parenting, especially during winter when both childcare and survival work intensified in importance and difficulty. As the door closes behind her, the hut feels different again, quieter with 2 adults gone, more focused on maintenance than active work. The grandmother hums softly as she spins, the repetitive motion and sound almost hypnotic in the afternoon dimness. The younger children have settled into that peculiar winter state, not quite napping but energy conserved, movements minimal, voices lowered. This conservation mode was another winter survival strategy. Between active work periods, medieval people often entered a state of reduced activity, not true hibernation, but a similar energy-preserving response to cold and limited food. Modern people rarely experience this state, with constant artificial light, stable temperatures, and abundant food disrupting seasonal rhythms. The afternoon deepens, shadows lengthening as the sun begins its early retreat. The light through the small windows shifts from grey to amber, the last direct rays before sunset. Time moves differently here, marked by light quality, fire needs, and body rhythms rather than mechanical clocks. The father returns with more firewood and something else, news that travels through his expression before he speaks. Something has happened in the village. The grandmother straightens, her hands stilling on the wool as she waits for him to explain after he set down his burden. "Ella's time has come," he says simply. The midwife is with her. Birth in winter brought special dangers and needs. The grandmother immediately begins gathering items from her stores: herbs, clean cloths, a small pottery container of what might be rendered fat for a birthing salve. Though not the primary midwife, her experience will be valuable, especially in winter when complications carried higher risks. "I'll go when Martha returns," she tells the father, who nods understanding. The oldest daughter was capable of managing the household and sick child temporarily, but the grandmother wouldn't leave until this relief arrived. The news has shifted the hut's energy again. Birth, like illness, was a community event in medieval villages. Resources would be redirected, tasks redistributed, and support mobilized to protect both mother and newborn during the dangerous winter entry into life. The sick boy has awakened at the activity, his eyes tracking his father's movements around the hut. "Is the baby coming?" he asks weakly, a question that transcends language barriers in its childish curiosity. The father smiles, the first full smile you've seen from him. "Yes," he answers, sitting beside his son. "Another cousin for you, God willing." The family connections are becoming clearer. Ella must be related, perhaps the father's sister or the mother's. The village seems to be a network of interconnected families sharing resources and support across household boundaries when needed. The father uses this moment of connection to help his son drink more of the honey-laced medicine. The boy complies more willingly now, either from improved condition or interest in the birth news. Small motivations could make significant differences in recovery. Something medieval healers understood well from observation. The hut door opens again, admitting the mother and oldest daughter returning together, arms full of gathered materials, some root vegetables unearthed from storage pits, kindling collected from the woodland edge, and a bundle of something that might be reed or straw for craft work. They immediately sense the change in atmosphere, looking to the father for explanation. When he shares the birth news, they too begin preparations, the mother setting aside a portion of the day's bread for the birthing household, the daughter checking stores of clean rags that might be needed. The grandmother explains her plan to assist after ensuring household stability. The mother nods approval. Though younger, she clearly shares authority in these decisions. Experience and capability determined leadership more than strict age hierarchies, especially in practical matters of survival and community support. As the winter day fades toward evening, the family adjusts to this new development while maintaining their own recovery from the night's crisis. The sick boy continues to improve gradually. The household tasks proceed with necessary modifications, and the community beyond the hut walls shifts its resources to support a winter birth. The medieval day cycles toward its close, not with defined work hours or scheduled activities, but with the natural progression from daylight to firelight, from active labour to evening conservation, from individual household focus to broader community awareness. Each transition seamless, each adjustment made without complaint or confusion, each person understanding their role in the intricate dance of winter survival. Evening approaches with its own distinct rhythm. The pale winter sun vanishes behind the tree line, taking with it what little warmth it provided. Temperature drops immediately. You can almost feel the cold rushing in to reclaim the world as darkness returns. Inside the hut, preparations for night begin with practiced efficiency. The father builds up the fire, carefully selecting wood pieces for the evening burn. The morning and midday fires served different purposes than the evening blaze, which needed to provide both cooking heat and warmth for the family's main gathering time. He chooses dense oak pieces that will burn slowly and steadily, supplemented with a few resinous pine chunks for brighter light. "Will you go to help Ella?" he asks the grandmother, who nods as she wraps an additional shawl around her shoulders. Though elderly, her skills are needed, and age doesn't excuse anyone from community contribution when lives hang in balance. "Martha knows what to do for the boy," she answers, glancing at the oldest daughter who is already preparing the evening's herbal treatment. The knowledge transfer is clear. The grandmother has taught the girl well, ensuring healing skills pass to the next generation. The sick boy is sitting up now, propped against folded bedding, his eyes brighter and more alert than earlier. The crisis has passed, though recovery will take days. He watches the activity around him with the interest of a child who's been confined to bed, but whose mind remains active. "When will the baby come?" he asks his grandmother as she checks his forehead one last time before departing. "Babies come in their own time," she answers, with the wisdom of someone who has witnessed hundreds of births. "Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, we wait and help." The practicality of her response reflects medieval understanding of childbirth, unpredictable, dangerous, but following patterns that experienced women recognized and worked with rather than fought against. No inducing labor or scheduled deliveries, just patient attendance to natural processes with interventions only when absolutely necessary. The grandmother gathers her bundle of birth-helping supplies, herbs, cloths, the small pot of salve, and prepares to depart. Before she goes, the mother hands her a small cloth package. "The rabbit liver," she explains, "for strength after." The grandmother nods approval at this thoughtful offering. Organ meats were prized for their concentrated nutrition, particularly important for women after childbirth when blood loss and exhaustion threatened recovery. The rabbit's timely arrival now seems providential rather than merely fortunate. As the grandmother leaves, wrapped in every available layer against the deepening cold, the household reconfigures itself again. The mother takes over supervision of evening activities, the oldest daughter monitors her sick brother, and the father maintains the fire while repairing a leather shoe by firelight, a task impossible in daylight hours when more critical work required attention. "I'll check on you before midnight," the mother tells the grandmother at the door, a reference to that middle night waking that structured medieval winter sleep. Each household member had specific night responsibilities, and these needed redistribution with the grandmother absent. Evening brings its own specific tasks. The mother stirs the pot that's been simmering all day, now a thicker stew as liquid evaporated and flavours concentrated. The oldest daughter sets out wooden bowls and spoons. No plates or multiple courses in this meal service, just the practical delivery of essential nutrition. The youngest children have been mostly quiet during the afternoon's low-energy period, but grow more animated as evening meal approaches. Their play becomes more active, a game involving a ball made from scrap cloth and a target drawn in ash on the wall furthest from the fire. "Not so wild," the father cautions as the ball flies close to a carefully preserved store of dried herbs. Resources are too precious for careless damage, even by playing children. The oldest girl has finished preparing her brother's medicine and now helps serve the evening meal, ladling stew into the family's bowls. The portions are carefully calibrated, largest for the father whose outdoor work burns most energy, substantial for the mother and older children, modest for the smaller ones, and a special portion for the sick boy that contains more broth than solids. "I'm hungry," the sick boy says, the first expression of appetite since his fever broke. His mother smiles at this positive sign. Hunger indicated healing in medieval medical understanding, the body's recognition that it needed fuel to rebuild strength. Mealtime conversation is more animated than at midday. The father shares news gathered during his wood collection, updates about other families, weather observations, signs of wildlife movement that might indicate hunting opportunities. Medieval information networks operated through such casual exchanges, person to person, essential knowledge moving through communities without written records. Thomas saw wolf tracks by the North Stream, he mentions, between spoonfuls of stew. This isn't idle chatter, but vital safety information. Predator movements affected everything from travel paths to livestock protection to children's play boundaries. The mother nods, mentally adjusting her plans for tomorrow's water collection. We'll take the east path then, she decides. The detour a small price for safety. You notice how the children listen attentively to this exchange, absorbing crucial environmental knowledge without formal instruction. Their education was embedded in daily life, practical information prioritized over abstract learning. The meal continues with similar practical discussions, plans for tomorrow's work, redistribution of tasks with the grandmother absent, assessments of remaining supplies. No topic is trivial. Each conversation serves survival purposes. Even the children contribute observations or questions relevant to household management. After eating, the bowls are carefully scraped clean, not just tidiness, but practical conservation of every food particle. The oldest daughter takes them outside again for a quick snow scouring. Washing dishes with precious heated water would be wasteful when cold cleaning methods worked adequately. Evening activities shift to firelight work. The mother brings out partially completed projects, a woven reed basket, a half-finished woolen cap, repair work on a torn tunic. The father continues with the leather work, occasionally helping the older boy who is learning to carve a simple wooden toggle button. The sick boy watches from his bed, sometimes dozing but increasingly alert. His mother brings him small tasks he can manage while recovering, winding yarn into balls, sorting seeds saved for spring planting, or simply holding items as needed. Idleness wasn't an option even in illness. Contribution to household work began as soon as physically possible. Medieval healing understood the importance of mental engagement during recovery. Keeping the mind occupied prevented the melancholy that could slow physical healing, while simple tasks helped rebuild strength gradually. Modern medicine has rediscovered these principles under different names. "Tell us about the wolves, Papa," one of the younger children requests as darkness deepens outside. Storytelling was evening entertainment, education, and cultural transmission all at once. Winter nights provided the main opportunity for this crucial knowledge transfer. The father sets aside his leatherwork and considers the request. "Not wolves tonight," he decides, glancing at his sick son. Tales of predators might not be ideal for a child recovering from fever dreams. The story of great-grandfather and the flood, I think. He begins a tale that's clearly familiar to the family, yet still captivating. The story of an ancestor who predicted a spring flood by observing unusual animal behaviors and ice patterns. The narrative contains practical knowledge, what signs warn of flooding, family history, how their current homestead was chosen for its higher ground, and moral lessons, the importance of observation and warning others. You're struck by how the story serves multiple purposes beyond entertainment. It preserves critical survival information in memorable form, reinforces family identity and resilience, and trains the children's minds in essential observation skills. Nothing is merely diversion. Everything contains practical value. The children listen with complete attention, occasionally asking questions that suggest they've heard this story before but are now understanding new layers of meaning. The father patiently explains historical details or clarifies technical aspects of flood prediction when asked. This isn't passive entertainment but active learning. As the story concludes, the mother checks the sick boy again, feeling his forehead and pulse points with practiced sensitivity. "Better," she pronounces, mixing the next dose of medicine with honey to make it more palatable. Recovery from winter illness followed predictable patterns that experienced caregivers recognized and supported. Outside, full darkness has arrived, and with it the deep cold that makes the hut's walls creak and contract. The father rises to check the door ceiling, pressing additional cloth into gaps where drafts might enter. Every bit of heat conservation matters on winter nights, especially with a sick child still vulnerable to chills. "I wonder how Ella fares," the mother says quietly as she works on the woolen cap, her fingers moving automatically through the familiar motions of knitting. "The grandmother will send word if help is needed," the father answers, his practical tone masking what might be genuine concern. Childbirth in winter carried additional risks, from the cold stress on mother and baby to the difficulty of summoning additional help through snow-blocked paths. The family falls into companionable silence, broken only by the fire's crackle and the soft clicking of knitting needles. Even the children have quieted, either absorbed in simple tasks or beginning to feel sleep's approach. This peaceful evening interval between meal and bedtime had its own important role in medieval life. This quieter time allowed bodies to conserve energy, minds to process the day's events, and families to strengthen bonds through simple presence. Modern research suggests such low stimulation periods are essential for mental health and information processing, something medieval people understood intuitively, if not scientifically. The peaceful interval is interrupted by a knock at the door. The father rises immediately to answer it, admitting a young man stamping snow from his feet, perhaps 16 or 17, bundled against the cold and slightly out of breath from running. "The grandmother sent me," he explains between puffs of visible breath. "She asks for more cloths and the raspberry leaf from your stores." He looks at the mother, who nods understanding and moves to collect the requested items. Raspberry leaf was known for its effects on the womb, used to strengthen contractions when labour slowed. The request suggests Ella's birth is progressing but needs some assistance, not yet an emergency, but requiring additional resources. The mother quickly gathers clean cloths and a bundle of dried leaves from a storage container near the fire, where important medicinal herbs were kept warm and dry. She wraps everything carefully to protect it from snow during the return journey and hands the package to the messenger. "Tell her there's a thread of angelica root in with the raspberry," she instructs. "Just a small piece for strength." The young man nods, tucks the package securely inside his outer garments, and departs as quickly as he came. The entire exchange takes less than 2 minutes, efficient, purposeful, without wasted words or movements. After the messenger's departure, the hut feels different, more connected to the broader community and its current crisis. The mother stares at the door briefly after it closes, perhaps offering a silent prayer or simply processing concern for the labouring woman. "Will the baby be all right?" the sick boy asks, his fever-thinned face serious in the firelight. "God willing," his mother answers, the only honest response in a world where childbirth remained dangerous despite all knowledge and skill. She returns to her knitting with slightly quicker movements, perhaps working out anxiety through productive activity. The evening continues with this new undercurrent of community concern. The father tells another story, lighter this time, a humorous tale about a clever fox outsmarting a wolf. The children laugh at familiar parts, tension releasing through shared amusement. Even the sick boy smiles, his improved condition evident in his engagement. As true night settles in, the family begins preparation for first sleep. The fire is adjusted, not banked fully yet, but positioned for optimal heating with minimal tending until the middle night waking. The father places larger logs strategically, creating a heat profile that will last for the first sleep cycle. The mother prepares the sick boy for night, helping him change position, arranging bedding for both warmth and comfort, and giving a final dose of medicine. Her movements are gentle but efficient, the care of a skilled nurse rather than merely an affectionate parent. Sleep will heal you faster than any herb, she tells him, a piece of medical wisdom that modern science has confirmed. The body's recovery systems function most effectively during sleep, something medieval healers had observed even without understanding the specific mechanisms. The younger children are settled in the sleeping lofts, climbing wooden ladders to the platforms near the ceiling where warmer air collects. They know the routine perfectly, arranging themselves with minimal direction, the smallest in the warmest central positions. Larger children toward the edges where their bigger bodies lose heat more slowly. With the grandmother absent, sleeping arrangements shift slightly. The oldest daughter will sleep near her sick brother, responsible for watching him through the night. The parents will handle fire maintenance and other night tasks usually shared with the grandmother. Everyone understands these adjustments without lengthy explanation. Nightcaps are distributed and put on, woolen coverings that prevent heat loss through the head. Some family members wrap additional cloth around necks or across faces, the medieval equivalent of balaclavas, trapping warm breath and protecting vulnerable facial skin from cold. The father makes a final check of the hut's security. Door firmly latched, window coverings secure. Any food remains protected from potential vermin. Medieval knights carried threats from both the cold and opportunistic creatures seeking warmth or food. A secure shelter addressed both concerns. Before fully settling, the mother places warmed stones in strategic locations, near the sick boy's feet, at the corners of sleeping areas, beside water containers to prevent freezing. These heat reserves will slowly release warmth through the first sleep cycle, supplementing body heat and fire warmth in the increasingly cold night. Sleep well, the father says, a wish rather than an expectation in a world where comfort remained relative and night waking was normal. The family responds with similar murmured good wishes, voices already softening as bodies prepare for sleep's approach. The hut grows quieter as movement ceases and breathing slows. Outside, the winter night deepens, stars appearing in crystal clarity as the temperature drops further. Inside, the family lies wrapped in layers of wool, fur and fabric, creating individual cocoons of trapped body heat within the larger envelope of the hut's sheltering walls. You find yourself drifting towards sleep as well, lulled by the fire's diminishing crackle and the soft, regular breathing of the family around you. The last thing you notice before your eyes close is the sick boy's face, peaceful now in sleep, his fever broken and recovery underway. One small victory against winter's many challenges. The first sleep period passes in that strange medieval way, deeper than modern sleep but shorter in duration, the body falling quickly into rest knowing it will wake again before dawn. Dreams come easily in this cold, dark season when the boundary between conscious and unconscious seems thinner, more permeable. You wake suddenly, unsure at first what disturbed your sleep. The hut is darker now, the fire burned down to glowing coals that provide minimal light and reduced heat. The temperature has dropped noticeably, your breath forming visible clouds in the chill air. The father is already awake, moving with that middle night alertness that seems so strange to modern sensibilities. He kneels at the hearth, carefully exposing the coals, adding small pieces of kindling with practiced precision. The fire responds immediately, small flames appearing and growing steadily as he adds progressively larger pieces of wood. The mother wakes next, rising without confusion or grogginess. Her first movement is toward her sick son, checking his breathing and temperature with gentle touches that don't disturb his sleep. Her face shows relief in the growing firelight. His condition continues to improve. This middle night period has a different quality than day or evening. Hushed, intimate, existing in a space between worlds, the adults move with purpose but speak rarely, using gestures or single words when necessary. It's a time for essential tasks rather than conversation. The oldest daughter wakes now too, immediately alert and ready for her responsibilities. She checks her brother just as her mother did, then moves to help with fire maintenance, bringing wood from the indoor stack to her father. The teamwork is seamless, requiring no direction or discussion. As heat begins to build again from the revived fire, the father prepares to check outside conditions. He wraps additional layers around himself, covering all but his eyes against the dangerous cold of deep night. Winter nights could bring sudden weather changes, and regular monitoring was essential for safety planning. He opens the door just enough to slip through, minimizing heat loss from the hut. The brief glimpse of outside reveals a clear night, stars brilliant in the black sky, snow reflecting their faint light in crystalline patterns. The door closes quickly behind him, but the blast of frigid air lingers, a reminder of how thin the boundary is between survival and danger. The mother uses this middle night period to prepare for morning, setting out breakfast ingredients, checking water supplies, positioning items that will be needed at dawn. This efficient use of waking time reduced morning chaos and ensured essential tasks weren't forgotten in the day's rush. The sick boy stirs but doesn't fully wake. The mother takes advantage of his semi-conscious state to help him drink water mixed with honey, hydration critical for recovery, easier to achieve in this liminal state between sleeping and waking. He swallows automatically before settling back into deeper sleep. The father returns quickly, bringing with him the sharp scent of extreme cold and news written in his expression before he speaks. "The sky has that green tint," he says quietly to his wife. "Storm coming by tomorrow night." This simple observation carries significant weight. A green tint to the night sky often preceded major winter storms in this region, a prediction method based on generations of observation rather than meteorological instruments. The advance warning would trigger specific preparations throughout the village when daylight came. "How fares Ella?" the mother asks as she helps him remove his outer layers, still crusted with crystallized breath from even this brief exposure. "Light in the window still," he answers, meaning the birth continues, the midwife and grandmother still working. No news beyond that. But the continued activity suggests the mother at least still labours. In medieval childbirth, silence often signalled the worst outcomes. The middle night period continues with quiet efficiency, the fire built to proper strength, water containers checked for freezing, the sick boy given another dose of medicine, sleeping positions adjusted for maximum warmth conservation, each task small but significant in the complex system of winter survival. The father pauses in his work, head tilting slightly as he listens to something outside human hearing range. Winds changed, he notes after a moment, coming from the north now. This simple observation confirmed his storm prediction and added urgency to tomorrow's preparations. Northern winds brought the coldest weather and heaviest snow, potentially trapping the community for days if proper precautions weren't taken. The mother nods, understanding, mentally adjusting plans again. "We'll need more wood inside," she says, "and check the root storage before it hits." They continue discussing preparations in this practical, abbreviated manner, not full sentences, but essential communication between partners who understand both the spoken and unspoken parts of each exchange. Their shared knowledge base makes elaborate explanation unnecessary. As the fire reaches proper strength and essential tasks are completed, the family prepares for second sleep. This transition happens just as smoothly as the waking did, bodies shifting back to rest mode, positions adjusted for optimal warmth, final checks of fire and sick child completed efficiently. The oldest daughter remains awake slightly longer, taking a turn at watching her brother while her parents return to sleep. This rotation of responsibility ensured someone remained alert to any changes in the boy's condition while allowing everyone some rest during the long night. The hut settles back into sleep rhythms, the fire burning steadily, providing both physical warmth and the psychological comfort of its gentle light against winter's absolute darkness. Outside, the stars wheel slowly across the sky, measuring night's passage in their ancient patterns. Second sleep has its own character, often deeper than first sleep, carrying the body through the coldest hours before dawn when survival is most challenged. Medieval people understood this rhythm and structured their sleep to take advantage of its natural flow rather than fighting against it. The night continues its measured progression toward morning, each hour bringing subtle changes in temperature, light quality, and human needs. The family sleeps through most of these transitions, their bodies conserving energy during winter's most demanding period. Dawn arrives reluctantly, the winter sun struggling to climb above the horizon. The light changes before actual brightness appears, a subtle shift from black to deep blue to grey that medieval people recognized as morning's first signal. Inside the hut, bodies stir in response to this ancient cue, waking not to clocks but to light's gradual return. The father is first up, moving immediately to the fire. Overnight it has burned down again but not out. The careful banking during middle night preserved enough coals to quickly rebuild the morning blaze. He adds small kindling, then progressively larger pieces, creating a fire optimized for morning needs, hot enough for cooking but focused on heating the hut after night's deep chill. The mother wakes next, her first glance going to her sick son. He sleeps peacefully, his breathing regular, face less flushed than yesterday. The crisis has truly passed. She allows herself a moment of relief before rising to begin the day's work, mentally calculating what must be accomplished before the predicted storm arrives. The oldest daughter joins her parents in the morning routine, moving to check water supplies and prepare breakfast ingredients. The younger children remain asleep in their lofts. They'll be woken only when necessary, allowing their growing bodies maximum rest during winter's challenging season. Morning conversation is minimal, focused entirely on practical concerns. Storm preparations, the father says simply as he pulls on additional layers for outdoor work. The mother nods, already dividing tasks in her mind between household members. "I'll have the children gather everything from the root cellar," she responds. "Better to have it inside before the snow locks it down." This brief exchange contains complex shared understanding. They both know exactly what a northern winter storm requires in preparations, which tasks take priority, and how to distribute work efficiently among family members. Years of shared experience make elaborate explanations unnecessary. The father pauses before leaving, looking toward the corner where the sick boy sleeps. "He's better," the mother assures him. "The fever's broken properly." Her assessment carries the weight of experience. She's nursed countless winter illnesses and recognizes recovery patterns with medical precision. With a nod of relief, the father heads outside. The door opens briefly, admitting a blast of frigid air and a glimpse of the world beyond. Crystalline clear, the snow surface sparkling with ice crystals, the sky a pale blue that signals temporary calm before the predicted storm. The beautiful scene belies the danger it represents. Cold so intense it could freeze exposed skin within minutes. The mother wakes the younger children now, their transition from sleep more reluctant than the adults. They burrow deeper into bedding when first called, seeking to preserve the warm cocoons they've created overnight. Unlike modern children with central heating, they understand precisely what awaits outside their blankets, biting cold that will persist until they're active enough to generate body heat. "Come now," the mother coaxes. "Quick work makes warm bodies. Porridge is nearly ready." This practical encouragement works better than mere insistence. The children emerge gradually, immediately pulling on additional clothing before their feet ever touch the floor. They've learned from earliest ages that preserving body heat begins with this first transition from sleep to waking. Nothing like modern children who might run barefoot from warm beds across heated floors. Breakfast preparations focus on creating sustaining fuel for the day's work. The mother adds extra dried fruit to the morning porridge, calories that will be needed for storm preparation activities. Medieval people understood energy requirements intuitively, adjusting food quantities based on anticipated exertion and temperature conditions. The sick boy wakes as the breakfast smells fill the hut. "I'm hungry," he announces, the most positive sign yet of his recovery. His mother smiles, ladling a generous portion of porridge into a bowl for him. Appetite returning meant healing was well underway, the body rebuilding strength depleted by fever. As the family eats their morning meal, the door opens again, admitting the grandmother. She looks exhausted but satisfied, her face lined with the fatigue of a night spent in concentrated work. Before anyone can ask, she announces the news. A boy, strong lungs, mother came through well. The simple statement brings visible relief to the entire family. Childbirth outcomes remained uncertain even with the most skilled attendants. A healthy mother and baby represented the best possible result after a winter birth's heightened dangers. "God be thanked," the mother says, quickly preparing a bowl of hot porridge for the returning grandmother. The older woman accepts it gratefully, settling near the fire with the bone-deep weariness of someone who has worked through the night at an intensely demanding task. Ella asks if Martha might help her today, the grandmother says between spoonfuls, looking toward the oldest daughter. "Just the morning to get things settled." The girl nods immediately, pleased at the recognition of her capabilities. Helping a new mother was both community service and practical education. Young women learned postpartum care through direct participation, knowledge that would serve them when their own time came. "The storm?" the father asks the grandmother, curious if she's observed the same signs he noted during the night. "Coming by nightfall," she confirms. Thomas and Jacob are spreading word. Everyone's preparing. This brief exchange illustrates the medieval information network in action. Weather observations shared quickly throughout the community, preparations coordinated without central authority or formal communication systems. Survival depended on this collective intelligence and cooperative response. The grandmother has brought something back with her, a small bundle wrapped in clean cloth. She finishes her porridge and then presents it to the mother. "From Ella, for your boy, first milk." The mother accepts the package with evident gratitude, opening it to reveal a small container of colostrum, the nutrient-rich first milk produced after childbirth. Its medicinal properties were well understood in medieval times, particularly for treating respiratory illnesses. Sharing this precious substance represented significant sacrifice from the new mother, a gift of healing from one family to another. This will strengthen him quickly, the mother tells her sick son as she helps him drink the slightly yellow liquid. The boy makes a face at the unfamiliar taste but consumes it obediently, understanding its importance from his mother's tone and the careful way she handles the container. With breakfast completed, the day's storm preparations begin in earnest. The father has already departed for heavier outdoor work, bringing in maximum firewood, checking animal shelters, securing anything that might be damaged by heavy snow or wind. The remaining family divides indoor preparation tasks with practiced efficiency. The mother sends the younger children to the storage pit, a root cellar dug into the ground a short distance from the hut where vegetables, apples, and other preserves were kept at near freezing temperatures. Before a major storm, everything needed for several days would be brought inside, preventing dangerous trips outdoors if the weather turned truly severe. Take the large basket and bring all the turnips and remaining apples, she instructs, and check the cabbage pit as well. The children bundle up eagerly for this outdoor task. Despite the cold, any excuse to move actively was welcome after the confined stillness of winter nights. They depart in a swirl of energy, momentarily admitting another blast of frigid air as the door opens and closes. The grandmother has moved to check on the sick boy, her experienced hands testing his temperature and examining his eyes and tongue. The colostrum will help, she confirms, and he's fighting it well himself. Her medical assessment carries authority born from decades of observation and treatment. With the oldest daughter preparing to help the new mother and the younger children gathering food stores, the mother and grandmother turn to indoor storm preparations. These followed patterns established over generations, specific actions that transformed the hut from regular winter mode to storm survival configuration. "I'll check all the ceiling," the grandmother says, moving slowly around the hut's perimeter despite her evident fatigue. She examines each window covering, door frame and wall joint, identifying places where wind might penetrate during the coming storm. Where she finds potential gaps, she presses additional moss, cloth or clay mixture into the spaces, creating improved barriers against deadly drafts. The mother, meanwhile, inventories essential supplies, checking water containers, preserved foods, medicines and candles or rushlights that might be needed during extended dark periods. Medieval storm preparation focused on survival essentials first, comfort considerations only if time and resources permitted. "Should I move the chickens?" she asks the grandmother, referring to the small flock in their corner of the hut. The older woman considers the weather signs she observed during her pre-dawn return. Yes, she decides, and bring the kindling inside to dry completely. We'll need quick fires if the temperature drops further. These small adjustments represented critical survival knowledge, understanding exactly when animal arrangements needed modification, recognizing when slightly damp kindling that worked fine in regular conditions would fail during extreme cold, anticipating how needs would change as the storm intensified. This wasn't panicked emergency response, but calculated preparation based on generations of experience. The door bursts open again as the children return, red-cheeked and energetic, with baskets full of vegetables from the storage pits. Their excitement suggests they've experienced something worth sharing. "There's a fox in the old oak," the youngest boy announces, setting down his burden of root vegetables. "We saw his tracks all around the tree and then up he went." This wildlife sighting represents more than childish enthusiasm. Fox behavior often indicated weather changes, and tracking their movements provided information about hunting prospects and potential threats to small livestock. The children's observation would be noted as part of the community's environmental monitoring. "Did he look fat or thin?" the grandmother asks, turning what might seem like casual conversation into a practical assessment. fox condition indicated prey availability, which in turn suggested whether human hunters might find game or face empty forests. Fat, the middle boy reports confidently. His tail was huge and fluffy. The grandmother nods, filing this information alongside her other observations. A healthy fox population suggested sufficient small prey, which meant larger predators might stay deeper in the forest rather than approaching human settlements out of desperation. Every ecological detail connected to human safety in ways modern people rarely consider. As midday approaches, the oldest daughter prepares to visit the new mother, gathering clean cloths and a small pot of broth her mother has prepared. Postpartum care was communal in medieval villages, with women sharing resources and assistance during the vulnerable period after birth. Just until midday, the mother reminds her, we need you back before the storm worsens. Even community support operated within the constraints of weather and safety considerations. The daughter nods, understanding, already wrapping herself in multiple layers for the short journey to Ella's home. The morning's activities continue with quiet intensity, not panicked rushing but focused, deliberate work. Additional firewood is stacked strategically inside the hut. Vegetables are arranged in cold storage areas away from the fire. Water containers are filled to maximum capacity. Each task completed methodically, each person contributing according to their abilities. The sick boy watches from his bed, occasionally dozing but increasingly alert. He sorts through dried beans as his small contribution to the preparations, separating any damaged ones from those that will be cooked during storm days. Even limited participation maintained his connection to family survival efforts. The father returns briefly at midday, bringing an additional load of firewood and news from the broader community. The river's starting to freeze at the edges, he reports as he warms his hands by the fire. Thomas says it might close completely if the storm lasts. This seemingly simple observation carries significant implications that everyone present immediately understands. A frozen river meant no fishing, but potentially easier hunting on the far bank where deer sometimes congregated. It meant water would need to come from melted snow rather than flowing sources. It meant travel patterns would change as ice became either pathway or hazard, depending on its thickness. The father eats quickly, standing rather than sitting to minimize rest time during daylight hours. Jacob and I will check the North Forest edge before the snow starts, he tells his wife. The deadfall from autumn should provide enough extra wood to see us through. This collaborative work arrangement again demonstrates medieval community cooperation. The two men would accomplish in hours what might take one man a full day, ensuring both families had sufficient wood before storm confinement. The efficiency gained through partnership often made the difference between comfort and crisis during extended winter storms. As the father prepares to leave again, the grandmother stops him with a gesture. "Take this to Thomas's wife," she says, handing him a small package of herbs, "for the cough the little one's developing." This casual medical consultation reveals another aspect of medieval healthcare networks. The grandmother, recognizing symptoms described in passing conversation or observed directly during community interactions, proactively provides treatment without formal request. Preventive care happened through these informal exchanges, heading off potential crises before they developed. The father nods, tucking the package inside his clothing where body heat will protect it from freezing. No additional explanation is needed. He understands the importance of the medicine and will ensure its delivery despite his own demanding work schedule. After he departs, the grandmother finally allows herself proper rest, settling near the fire with a sigh that speaks volumes about her exhaustion. Birth attendants required intense concentration, physical stamina, and emotional resilience, particularly challenging for an older woman who had already been managing a sick child before being called to the birthing. "Sleep a while," the mother tells her. "We have everything in hand." The gentle order acknowledges both the grandmother's need for recovery and her tendency to continue working despite fatigue. In the medieval household, care flowed in all directions, from young to old, as much as old to young, when circumstances required. The grandmother doesn't argue, a testament to her genuine exhaustion. She arranges herself on bedding near the fire, adjusting her position to benefit from maximum warmth while requiring minimum fuel. Even in rest, efficiency principles apply: body heat conservation, strategic positioning, minimal resource use. As afternoon progresses, subtle weather changes become apparent. The quality of light alters first, the clear blue sky gradually hazed with high, thin clouds that diffuse sunlight into a flatter, greyer illumination. The temperature begins dropping more noticeably, the cold acquiring a sharper edge that penetrates clothing more aggressively. The mother notes these changes and adjusts the day's plan accordingly. "We'll prepare everything for 3 days inside," she tells the children, increasing their previous estimates. Better to over-prepare than find themselves lacking essential supplies if the storm exceeds initial predictions. The youngest children are set to filling water containers with clean snow from areas away from paths or animal tracks. This task serves multiple purposes: creating emergency water supplies, burning excess energy before confinement, and teaching assessment skills as they learn to identify the cleanest snow sources. "Look for the white-blue snow," the mother instructs, "not the grey or yellow." This simple guidance contains sophisticated environmental literacy, understanding how snow color indicates purity, recognizing contamination signs, and identifying optimal collection areas. Inside, preparation continues with food accessibility arrangements. Items needed during the storm are positioned for easy access without exposing the hut to excessive cold. Cooking ingredients, emergency supplies, and essential tools are organized in logical groupings, creating efficient systems for the confined period ahead. The sick boy has been moved slightly closer to the fire as the temperature drops. His recovery continues steadily, but he remains vulnerable to chills that could trigger relapse. The grandmother, awake again after a brief but deep sleep, prepares a preventive tea with ingredients selected specifically for respiratory support and immune strengthening. "Drink all of it," she tells him, supporting his shoulders as he sips the steaming liquid. The storm brings testing times for lungs. Her concern isn't unfounded. Extreme cold could exacerbate respiratory weakness following fever, while the increased smoke from constant fire maintenance created its own challenges for healing lungs. Medieval healers recognized these connection points between environment, illness, and recovery, adjusting treatments to address multiple factors simultaneously. The oldest daughter returns from helping the new mother and baby, bringing news that spreads visible relief through the household. "Ella's milk has come in well," she reports. "The baby nurses strongly." These simple observations represent critical survival information. Strong nursing meant the newborn would likely thrive despite being born in winter's most challenging season. Good milk production indicated the mother's health remained stable, reducing risk of complications that could leave the baby motherless, often a death sentence in medieval conditions. The grandmother nods approval at this report, her own medical assessment confirmed by the girl's observations. The knowledge transfer is evident. The oldest daughter is learning to recognize the same health indicators that experienced midwives use, building her practical medical education through direct participation. As true afternoon fades toward evening, the first physical signs of the approaching storm appear. Occasional gusts of wind shake the thatch. Small snow particles begin drifting from the increasingly grey sky, and the temperature drops more rapidly. The father and Jacob return, bringing the last loads of firewood before outdoor work becomes dangerous. "Time to settle in," the father announces, surveying the completed preparations with satisfaction. The firewood is stacked strategically, different sizes and types organized for specific uses. The food supplies are arranged for accessibility, water containers full, and animal areas prepared for extended confinement. The family has transformed their dwelling from regular winter mode to storm survival configuration. The mother serves an early evening meal, slightly larger portions than usual to fuel bodies that will need extra energy for heat generation during the coldest hours ahead. The stew contains more meat than typical, protein that will support sustained warmth production throughout the night. "Will the storm last long?" one of the younger children asks, eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Winter storms brought both adventure and danger, disrupting routine while testing survival systems. 3 days, perhaps 4, the grandmother answers, her assessment based on decades of weather observation rather than meteorological instruments. "We'll know its pattern by morning." As the family eats, the wind increases noticeably, no longer occasional gusts, but a steady pressure against the hut's walls. The sound changes too, the distinctive moan of winter storm winds, finding every gap and corner of the structure. Temperature drops more rapidly as frigid air from northern regions advances in earnest. "The animals," the mother says, and the father nods understanding. They've been waiting for the storm's clear arrival before bringing additional livestock inside. The protection of valuable animals would now take priority, with meat sources like pigs or milk producers like goats given indoor shelter, despite the space limitations and odor challenges. The father rises, wrapping himself thoroughly before facing the increasingly hostile conditions outside. "I'll bring the milking goat and 2 sheep," he says. "Thomas will take the others." This cooperative livestock management represents another aspect of medieval community resilience. Rather than each family struggling to protect all their animals, they distributed the sheltering responsibility based on available space and structural strength. Some households took more animals, others contributed fodder or later labor in return, a complex exchange system that maximized survival chances for both humans and valuable livestock. While the father is gone, the grandmother supervises final indoor arrangements. Additional bedding is distributed, sleeping positions reconfigured to accommodate both humans and incoming animals. Medieval storm management often meant sacrificing comfort for survival, accepting crowding and odors as necessary trade-offs for shared body heat and protected food sources. "We'll sleep in shifts tonight," she tells the older children, establishing the overnight watch rotation that severe storms required, 2 awake at all times. This wasn't merely for fire maintenance, but comprehensive storm monitoring, checking for roof leaks, ensuring animal calm, watching for temperature drops that might require emergency responses. The door bursts open, admitting the father, another man, presumably Jacob, and several animals, a goat and 2 sheep, snow-covered and bleating their distress at the forced relocation. The men work quickly to settle them in the prepared area, securing tethers and providing fodder to calm the frightened creatures. The door closes with finality on the outside world. The storm has arrived in full force now, wind howling around the hut's edges, snow beginning to accumulate against its walls. Inside, humans and animals create a closed system of survival. Shared warmth, shared resources, shared vigilance against winter's most serious assault. "Now we wait," the father says simply, hanging his snow-crusted outer garments near the door. There's no fear in his voice, no anxiety about the howling tempest outside, just calm acceptance of natural patterns and confidence in preparations made. This wasn't their first winter storm, nor would it be their last. The hut settles into storm mode, a different rhythm than regular winter days. Bodies position themselves strategically around the central fire, the animals grow calmer in their corner, and the howling wind becomes background noise rather than cause for alarm. Inside this humble structure, medieval ingenuity has created a survival capsule against conditions that would kill an unprotected human within hours. As night falls completely outside, the grandmother begins a story, not for entertainment alone, but preservation of cultural memory and practical knowledge embedded in narrative form. She speaks of a previous great storm from her childhood, describing how her family survived when snow reached the roof edges and cold froze water containers inside their dwelling. The story contains practical advice wrapped in engaging narrative: when to conserve fuel versus when to build up fires, how to recognize and prevent frostbite, methods for keeping water liquid during extreme cold. The children listen with rapt attention, absorbing survival information that might save their lives in future winters. The medieval night descends fully now, the storm its fierce companion, while inside the humble hut, a family settles into ancient patterns of survival. Their knowledge, preparation, and community connections create security that no single individual could achieve alone. The essence of how humanity weathered winter's worst challenges for countless generations before modern technology changed our relationship with cold and darkness. Night deepens, and with it the storm intensifies. The wind no longer merely howls, it shrieks, a banshee wail that finds every crack and corner of the humble structure. Snow drives horizontally, accumulating against the windward wall in drifts that grow higher by the hour. Inside, the medieval family has entered a different mode of existence: storm time, with its own rhythms and rules. The first sleep period passes differently than regular winter nights. The adults take turns maintaining vigilance, watching for roof leaks, monitoring the fire, and checking animals. Even the children sleep more lightly, their bodies responding to the crisis atmosphere despite the adults' calm demeanor. "The wind speaks tonight," the grandmother murmurs during one particularly fierce gust that makes the walls creak ominously. She's not being poetic. Medieval people often interpreted weather patterns as communications, reading intentions and predictions in the sounds of extreme conditions. The father nods understanding. "It warns us to stay inside until it's finished its business." This personification of weather wasn't superstition, but a memory aid. Associating specific sounds with dangerous conditions helped transmission of survival knowledge across generations. Middle night comes earlier than usual, the normal waking time accelerated by the storm's demands. The entire family stirs when the father rises to rebuild the fire, which needs more frequent attention during extreme cold. The temperature difference between inside and outside has increased dramatically, creating stronger drafts that affect the fire's behavior. "How cold?" the mother asks simply as she helps add carefully selected wood to the flames. the father considers using his experienced body as a measuring instrument. 20 below, he estimates, not in modern Fahrenheit or Celsius, but in whatever local scale this family used to categorize deadly winter conditions. His assessment is based on how quickly his exposed skin numbed during his brief check outside, how the snow crystals behaved in the firelight, how the walls contracted with the intense cold. This temperature reading carries immediate practical implications. Water containers are moved closer to the fire, animal bedding is checked for freezing, and sleeping arrangements shift to maximize shared body heat. Medieval people didn't need thermometers to respond appropriately to temperature changes. Their survival-focused observation skills provided accurate enough information for necessary adjustments. The sick boy wakes fully during this middle night period, his recovery continuing despite the storm's stresses. It sounds angry, he says, listening to the wind's violent buffeting. Not angry, the grandmother corrects gently, just doing its work of moving the cold air from the mountains to the valleys. It has no feelings about us at all. This matter-of-fact explanation reflects medieval understanding of weather as natural process rather than supernatural punishment, despite the religious framework that coloured much of their worldview. As the family moves through their middle night activities, you notice additional storm-specific tasks. The father checks the roof beams, looking for any sign of snow weight stressing the structure. The mother examines food stores more carefully, mentally calculating sufficiency if the storm extends beyond initial estimates. The grandmother prepares a special tea, different from medicinal brews, this one designed for warming bodies from the inside during extreme cold. "Here," she says, passing cups of the steaming liquid, "drink it all." The beverage is dark and fragrant, containing dried berries, pine needles, and something with a slightly spicy quality, perhaps wild ginger or a similar stimulating root. Medieval winter beverages often combined hydration with internal warming properties, supporting the body's heat generation during extreme conditions. The animals in their corner require attention too. The goat and sheep have settled but need reassurance during particularly violent wind gusts. The chickens huddle together, their usual night behaviour exaggerated by the storm conditions. Even the smallest children understand their role in the situation, speaking softly near the animals, moving gradually rather than suddenly, maintaining the calm atmosphere that keeps both humans and livestock from panic responses that waste precious energy. "Will the roof hold?" one of the middle children asks, eyeing the thatch above as it shifts slightly with a powerful gust. "It's held through worse," the father answers matter-of-factly. The old oak breaks the worst of the north wind. His confidence isn't bravado, but experience. This family has weathered many winter storms in this dwelling, gradually improving its construction with lessons learned from each survival challenge. The grandmother has moved to sit beside the sick boy, checking his breathing and temperature with practiced hands. "The storm air is good for your lungs," she tells him, surprising you with this counterintuitive statement. She explains further, "The cold drives out the heat sickness if we keep you warm enough outside while the cool air touches only your face." This sophisticated understanding of fever management reflects medieval medical knowledge that was more effective than modern people often assume. The gradient between heated interior air and cold breathing air created conditions that reduced fever while supporting respiratory recovery, a technique rediscovered by modern medicine for certain conditions. As middle night activities conclude, the family prepares for second sleep, the deeper rest period that would carry them through until dawn. Sleeping positions have changed from regular winter arrangements, bodies clustered in more intimate groupings to share warmth. Privacy concerns diminished during survival situations, with practical needs taking precedence over modern sensibilities about personal space. "Sleep now," the father tells the children. "The storm speaks, but it cannot reach us here." His reassurance carries conviction born from experience. The family's preparations have created genuine security despite the frightening sounds outside. The second sleep period passes with the storm's peak intensity occurring sometime in the deepest hours of night. The sounds are tremendous: wind shrieking through the forest, occasional cracks of breaking branches, the continuous hiss of driving snow against the walls. Yet inside, the family sleeps with reasonable comfort, their physical and psychological preparations creating a buffer against winter's worst assault. Dawn arrives without visible sunlight. The storm has created a grey world where time becomes ambiguous. The family wakes to a changed acoustic environment. The wind has shifted from violent gusts to a steady, powerful flow, suggesting the storm has settled into its middle phase. The sound of snow against the walls has softened as accumulation creates insulating barriers around the structure's base. "How deep?" the mother asks as the father returns from his brief door check, not venturing outside but simply assessing conditions from the threshold. "Halfway up the wall on the north side," he reports, "still coming down steady." This significant accumulation would have implications for the days ahead. Exit paths would need clearing, roof weight would require monitoring, and community members might need assistance if their preparations proved insufficient. Breakfast preparation follows storm protocols rather than regular winter patterns. The fire is built stronger, food portions are slightly larger to support increased calorie needs during extreme cold, and preparation focuses on dishes that provide sustained energy through slow digestion. The porridge contains more fat today, rendered animal fat stored from autumn butchering, now providing crucial calories for temperature maintenance. The animals receive first feeding priority. Their survival directly impacts the family's long-term prospects. The goat's milk production must be maintained despite stress, the sheep's wool growth protected through adequate nutrition, and the chickens kept healthy enough to resume egg laying when conditions improve. Medieval livestock management understood these connection points between animal welfare and human survival. "Thomas's roof might need checking after this passes," the father mentions as the family eats. "That west corner never did get properly repaired after last year's storm." This concern for neighbours wasn't merely altruistic. Community survival required mutual support and preemptive problem-solving. A collapsed roof nearby would strain resources for everyone as emergency response and recovery assistance would be expected from all able households. "We can send the boys to help when the wind drops," the mother agrees, already planning post-storm community support while in the midst of the current crisis. This forward-thinking approach characterized medieval crisis management, addressing immediate needs while simultaneously preparing for recovery phases. The storm brings a unique daily rhythm to the household. Without the possibility of outdoor work, the family turns to indoor tasks that often received less attention during more active seasons. The father works on tool repairs, carefully reshaping handles, sharpening edges, and replacing worn components. The mother and grandmother sort through fabric scraps, planning future sewing projects and assessing clothing that needs mending. The older children practice skills appropriate to their ages and genders, the boys learning knot techniques for future hunting and fishing, the girls practicing fibre preparation for spinning and weaving. Even the youngest children have storm-appropriate activities, sorting seeds saved for spring planting, rolling cord from processed plant fibers, or simply observing and assisting with adult tasks as part of their practical education. Medieval childhood included early integration into survival work, with play and learning often indistinguishable. "Tell us about the wolf winter," one of the children requests as the morning progresses. Storytelling was essential entertainment during confined periods, but served educational purposes far beyond amusement. The grandmother nods, setting aside her mending to focus on this important knowledge transfer, disguised as entertainment. "It was before your father was born," she begins, establishing the time frame in family generations rather than calendar years. "The snow came early that year, before the last apples were even picked. We knew it would be a hungry season." The children settle in to listen, their bodies relaxing while minds engage with the narrative. The grandmother's voice takes on a rhythmic quality that cuts through the storm's background howl, creating a bubble of human connection against nature's wild energy outside. The story she tells contains crucial survival information embedded within dramatic narrative, how her family recognized early warning signs of an unusually harsh winter, what preparations they made that proved insufficient, how they adapted to unexpected challenges, and which desperate measures ultimately ensured their survival when food stores ran dangerously low. "The wolves came closer to the village than anyone had ever seen," she recounts, her voice lowering dramatically. "We could see their eyes shining at night, just beyond the light from the windows. They were as hungry as we were, maybe hungrier." The children's eyes widen at this vivid image, absorbing both the factual information about predator behavior during extreme winters and the emotional lesson about maintaining courage during frightening circumstances. This dual-layer knowledge transmission characterized medieval education, practical information wrapped in memorable narrative. "So what did you do?" the sick boy asks, fully engaged despite his recovering condition. "We did what we must," the grandmother answers, her tone conveying the gravity of survival decisions. "The men built higher barriers around the animal shelters. We brought the smallest livestock inside our homes. We never travelled alone, not even to the well or the woodpile, and we kept our fires burning all night, every night." These specific defensive measures against winter predators would lodge in the children's memories, potentially saving lives in future harsh seasons. The story continues with additional crisis responses, each containing actionable knowledge disguised as entertainment. As the grandmother's tale concludes, the father has finished repairing a wooden shovel, essential equipment for clearing paths once the storm subsides. He tests the edge against his thumb, nodding satisfaction at the tool's readiness. "This will see use soon enough," he comments, already thinking ahead to post-storm recovery work. The morning transitions to midday without marked light change. The storm's thick clouds and blowing snow create constant grey illumination that disconnects the family from normal time indicators. Medieval people relied heavily on subtle light shifts to track daily progression, making storms particularly disorienting to their time sense. The mother uses the fire's need for periodic rebuilding as a rough clock during such conditions. "Time for the midday meal," she announces after the third major fire adjustment since breakfast. Her internal timing remains calibrated despite the absence of visual cues, body and experience combining to maintain temporal orientation. The midday meal differs from regular winter fare, slightly richer, more warming spices included, preservation concerns temporarily relaxed as the family consumes perishable items that might not last through extended storm confinement. Nothing is wasted, but priorities shift toward immediate caloric and thermal needs rather than long-term storage optimization. After eating, the sick boy shows continued improvement, asking to sit up properly rather than remaining reclined. The grandmother helps position him near the fire, but not too close, creating the optimal temperature gradient for recovery. "Your color is better," she observes, her experienced eyes catching subtle changes in skin tone that indicate improved circulation and reduced fever. The afternoon brings a temporary intensification of the storm. Wind strength increases again and snow drives more violently against the walls. The sound changes from steady background noise to aggressive assault, drawing everyone's attention momentarily from their indoor tasks. "The storm argues with itself," the father observes with dry humor. "It can't decide whether to blow through quickly or settle in for a proper visit." This personification again serves practical purpose, helping family members, especially children, interpret frightening weather phenomena through familiar social metaphors rather than responding with fear-based stress that wastes energy. The mother smiles at his characterization, but moves to check the roof beams again, practical concern taking precedence over amusement. Medieval humor remained firmly grounded in survival awareness, never distracting from necessary vigilance during crisis conditions. As afternoon progresses, the family's activities shift toward preparation for the coming night, the most dangerous period during winter storms when temperature reaches its minimum and structural stresses peak. The father examines the firewood supply, selecting specific pieces for the night's rotation. The mother reorganizes sleeping arrangements, clustering bedding into optimal heat-sharing configurations. The grandmother prepares evening medicines, including preventive treatments for those not currently ill but potentially vulnerable during extreme conditions. "Thomas should have sealed that west corner," the father mutters, still concerned about their neighbor's roof. The depth of snow now makes immediate assistance impossible, but his mind continues working on community problems, even while focusing on his own family's needs. This dual awareness characterized medieval social structures, individual household survival and community welfare, recognized as interdependent rather than separate concerns. The oldest daughter has been teaching the younger children a string game, a simple amusement requiring only a loop of cord but developing both manual dexterity and pattern recognition. The activity serves multiple purposes during confinement: entertainment, skill development, and energy management through focused attention rather than physical movement that would create unwanted drafts or disturbance to resting animals. "I remember when your mother learned this game," the grandmother comments, watching the children's hands create intricate patterns. Her fingers were clever even then. This casual observation reinforces family continuity and identity during crisis, reminding children they belong to a lineage that has survived many such storms through generations of accumulated knowledge and skill. The mother looks up from her own work, mending a torn sleeve with tiny, precise stitches. "And I remember how patient you were teaching me," she responds, the exchange creating a moment of emotional warmth that counterbalances the physical cold pressing against the hut's boundaries. These relational exchanges served crucial psychological functions during confinement periods, maintaining emotional equilibrium when physical conditions created natural stress. Medieval people understood intuitively what modern psychology confirms: that social connection provides essential resilience during extended crisis situations. The day's light begins fading even further as afternoon transitions toward evening, though the difference is subtle through the storm's grey filter. The father uses this transition point to check outside conditions again, a quick door opening that admits a blast of wind-driven snow and bitter cold. He closes it quickly, shaking ice crystals from his beard. "Still coming down," he reports, drifts to the roof on the north corner now. this simple observation carries significant implications that everyone immediately understands. They'll need to clear snow from that section before it melts and causes structural damage, once conditions permit such work. Evening meal preparations begin with careful resource management. The mother selects foods that provide maximum warming effect while conserving those supplies most likely needed if the storm extends beyond predictions. Medieval meal planning during crisis involved sophisticated understanding of both nutritional properties and psychological impact. Certain foods provided comfort as well as calories, important for maintaining morale during extended confinement. The sick boy continues showing improvement, accepting a larger portion than previous meals and sitting upright throughout the evening activities. His recovery trajectory provides visible relief for the entire family, especially his mother, who has been dividing attention between storm management and illness care for days now. The worst has passed, the grandmother declares after checking his temperature and breathing again. Both the fever and the storm, I think. Her medical assessment and weather prediction carry equal authority, both based on decades of observation and pattern recognition rather than instruments or formal education. The evening brings another critical storm survival activity, extensive storytelling that serves multiple essential functions beyond entertainment. The father begins with a tale of his grandfather's legendary hunting success during a winter of particular scarcity. The story contains practical tracking information, animal behavior knowledge, and ethical guidance about resource sharing during community hardship. "He could have kept the deer for our family alone," the father explains, reaching the moral center of his narrative. No one would have faulted him with children to feed, but he divided it among 3 households whose men had found nothing that week. The values embedded in this simple story, reciprocity, community responsibility, and long-term thinking over immediate gain, constituted crucial social education for medieval children. Survival depended not just on practical skills, but on maintaining cooperative social structures that could weather crisis together better than individual households alone. The grandmother follows with a different type of story, a teaching tale about plant identification that disguises detailed botanical knowledge within an engaging narrative about a lost child finding her way home through recognizing useful forest resources. The children absorb complex information about wintertime plant usage while emotionally connecting with the story's protagonist. And that's how she knew the birch bark would save her brother's wound from poisoning, the grandmother concludes, having skillfully embedded specific medicinal information within the adventure narrative. Medieval knowledge transmission rarely separated practical content from engaging delivery. The two remained integrated for maximum retention and application. As true night settles outside, the storm begins showing subtle signs of diminishing strength. The wind's voice changes pitch slightly, gusts becoming less frequent though still powerful when they occur. The family notices these shifts, their weather-reading abilities refined through lifelong observation and generational knowledge transfer. It will break by morning, the father predicts, not through wishful thinking but careful attention to changing patterns, though the clearing will bring the worst cold. This accurate prediction reflects sophisticated understanding of winter storm cycles. The clearing that follows often brings temperature drops as cloud cover disappears and night radiation intensifies. The family immediately begins mental preparation for this next challenge, already thinking beyond the current crisis to its evolving phases. Night preparations now focus on the expected temperature drop rather than continued storm management. The fire is built to maximum safe size, water containers positioned to prevent freezing, and sleeping arrangements clustered even more tightly for optimum heat sharing. Medieval crisis response remained dynamic rather than static. constantly adjusting to changing conditions rather than following rigid protocols. The evening concludes with a final critical storm survival ritual, gratitude expression. The father speaks simple words of thankfulness for the hut's continued integrity, the adequate fire resources, the animals' calm adaptation to indoor confinement, and the sick boy's improving condition. This wasn't merely religious observance, but psychological technology, focusing attention on resources present rather than hardships endured, thereby supporting continued resilience. First sleep comes quickly for most family members, bodies exhausted from the heightened alertness that crisis conditions demand despite limited physical activity. The father takes first watch, his position near the fire, allowing regular maintenance while monitoring both structural integrity and sleeping family members. Medieval sleep during extreme conditions remained partially vigilant, not the complete unconsciousness that modern people expect in secure environments. The night deepens, the storm gradually diminishing as predicted. Temperature drops accordingly, creating new challenges that the watching father addresses methodically, adding specific woods to the fire, adjusting coverings over the sleepers, checking animal comfort in their corner. Each small action represents generations of accumulated knowledge about extreme winter survival, preserved through practical transmission rather than written documentation. Middle night arrives with the storm noticeably quieter, stars occasionally visible through breaks in the clouds when the father checks outside conditions. The predicted clearing has begun, bringing both relief and new concerns as temperatures plummet further without cloud insulation. The family's middle night waking occurs with practiced coordination, bodies responding to internal timing and external necessity rather than arbitrary schedules. The mother rises to take her watch shift, the father providing a concise situation report before seeking his own rest period. Winds dropping, stars showing, temperature falling, he summarizes. The north corner needs watching for ice melt when sun hits tomorrow. This efficient communication contains everything needed for continued vigilance without wasted words or energy. The mother nods, understanding, taking position near the fire to begin her watch period. The sick boy wakes briefly during this transition, accepting water and medicine before returning to healing sleep. The animals stir in their corner, responding to the human movement, but settle quickly back into their own rest patterns. The grandmother wakes as well, her experienced body attuned to subtle changes in both storm conditions and household needs. The clearing comes, she observes, her statement acknowledging both immediate weather patterns and the broader psychological clearing that follows crisis survival. The family has weathered another significant challenge together. Yes, the mother agrees simply, and then the rebuilding begins. Her mind already turns toward recovery activities, path clearing, structural repairs, community assistance, and resource replenishment. Medieval crisis response included this forward momentum, never allowing relief to become complacency before the next necessary phase of survival work. The middle night period passes with the storm's voice progressively diminishing, occasional wind gusts representing its final arguments rather than continued assault. Inside, the family's watch rotation continues, older children taking brief shifts under adult supervision, learning the vigilance patterns that winter survival requires. Second sleep carries the family through the storm's final hours, bodies resting deeply now that the immediate crisis has passed, while minds begin processing the experience into memory and learning. Medieval psychology understood this integration phase intuitively. The importance of rest following intensity, allowing experiences to settle into useful knowledge rather than traumatic memory. Dawn approaches with dramatic transformation outside. The storm has passed completely, leaving behind a world altered by its passage. Stars fade as eastern light grows, revealing the storm's effects. Massive drifts reshaping the landscape, trees bowed under snow weight, familiar paths completely obliterated by the uniform white blanket. Inside, the family wakes to changed acoustics, the storm's constant background noise replaced by profound winter silence broken only by occasional snow shifting on the roof or animals stirring in their corner. This silence brings its own psychological effects. Relief mingled with awareness of the recovery work ahead. "And so we begin again," the father says simply as he rises to face the post-storm day. The family nods understanding, each member already mentally preparing for their role in the complex process of returning to normal winter functioning after extreme conditions. The medieval cycle continues. Crisis faced, survival achieved, recovery begun, knowledge gained, community maintained. Each storm experienced becomes part of the family's resilience foundation, strengthening their capacity to face whatever winter brings next. Their humble hut with its sophisticated survival systems. And as morning light gradually illuminates the transformed world outside, the family moves with quiet confidence into the next phase of their winter journey, shaped by the storm but not defined by it, challenged but not broken, their generations of knowledge having carried them through once again. Morning after the storm brings a world transformed, blindingly bright as sunlight reflects off pristine snow, unnaturally quiet after the wind's constant howl, and bitterly cold in the way only post-storm clarity allows. The temperature has plummeted further with cloud cover gone, creating that particular kind of cold that seems to crystallize the air itself. The father opens the door fully for the first time in 2 days, revealing a landscape barely recognizable. Snow has sculpted the world into new forms. Familiar paths vanished, outbuildings half buried, trees transformed into strange white sculptures. Most striking is the silence, that peculiar hush that follows major storms where sound itself seems frozen. "Oh, well then," he says simply, surveying what awaits. "We have work." His matter-of-fact acceptance of the massive recovery effort ahead reflects medieval resilience, acknowledging challenges without magnifying them through complaint or drama. The mother joins him at the doorway, her breath clouding instantly in the intense cold. Thomas's roof first, she decides, prioritizing community needs even before their own path clearing. The concern about their neighbor's vulnerable roof structure has remained throughout the storm confinement. This immediate focus on helping others wasn't sentimentality but practical survival strategy. Medieval communities functioned as interdependent systems. One household's crisis affected everyone's security. A collapsed roof nearby would strain resources for all, as the affected family would need emergency shelter, assistance rebuilding, and support for any injured members. The oldest son, already bundled for outdoor work, steps into the doorway beside his parents. At perhaps 14, he's achieved the physical capability for critical winter work while still developing the judgment that experience brings. "I'll check the path to Thomas's," he offers, eager to prove his worth in post-crisis recovery. The father nods approval but adds essential guidance. Test each step with the pole first. The drifts hide holes. This casual safety instruction reflects medieval risk management, acknowledging dangers without avoiding necessary work, teaching assessment skills rather than imposing rigid rules. The boy takes a long wooden pole and moves carefully into the snow landscape, each step preceded by probing to check depth and stability. This wasn't overly cautious behavior, but essential technique. Post-storm drifts could conceal abandoned wells, half-buried structures, or livestock that hadn't survived. One careless step could mean a broken leg, potentially fatal during recovery periods when medical resources were stretched thin. Inside, the hut begins transitioning from storm confinement to recovery mode. The grandmother supervises internal reorganization while the mother prepares to join outdoor work. The sick boy, significantly improved but not yet ready for cold exposure, watches from his bed with evident frustration at his limited participation. "I should help," he protests, attempting to rise. The grandmother places a firm hand on his shoulder, keeping him reclined. "You help by healing completely," she tells him with the practical wisdom of someone who has seen partial recoveries lead to dangerous relapses. "Another day inside means you'll work twice as strong tomorrow." Medieval healing prioritized complete recovery over premature activity, not from excessive caution but practical resource management. A fully healed person contributed more effectively than one weakened by relapse, and families couldn't spare healthy members to care for preventable setbacks when community recovery required maximum effort. The youngest children are assigned indoor tasks suitable to their capabilities, sorting through vegetables to identify any freezing damage, preparing simple food for workers who will return hungry from outdoor exertion, arranging drying space for snow-dampened clothing that will soon arrive. Even at 4 or 5 years old, they understand their contributions matter to family survival. Meanwhile, the father and oldest son have disappeared from view, making their way toward Thomas's home through snow that reaches chest height in places. The mother and middle son focus on clearing essential paths to the woodpile, the main animal shelter, and the storage pits that might need assessment after extreme temperature fluctuations. Snow removal followed strategic patterns rather than aesthetic preferences. Medieval winter pathways created practical networks connecting critical resources rather than clearing entire areas. The narrow channels they dig connect survival points while minimizing wasted energy on non-essential clearing. Mama, look. The middle son points skyward where a hawk circles against the brilliant blue. Wildlife sightings after storms provided both practical information and psychological lifting. Predators hunting meant smaller animals were active, suggesting the natural food chain had weathered the storm successfully. The mother pauses in her digging to observe the bird's flight pattern. "Good hunting for him today," she comments. "The mice will be moving under the snow." This casual observation contains sophisticated ecological understanding, how snow insulation creates active subneven zones where small mammals continue moving, and how predators adapt hunting techniques to these hidden but detectable pathways. Their work continues methodically through the morning, the physical exertion generating enough body heat to offset the bitter cold. Breath clouds mark each worker's position in the transformed landscape as they gradually restore human order to the storm-altered world. Inside, the grandmother has begun assessing food supplies after the storm consumption. Medieval inventory management involved sophisticated projections, calculating remaining quantities against expected needs while accounting for uncertain durations until spring renewal. Her experienced fingers count preserved foods, measure grain levels, and estimate remaining root vegetables with precision born from decades of winter management. The sick boy watches this process with growing awareness of its importance. "Will we have enough?" he asks, his voice carrying the seriousness of a child who already understands hunger's threat. Enough for need, not for waste, she answers truthfully. The response isn't meant to frighten but to educate. Medieval children learned resource realities early, developing conservation habits that modern abundance has largely eliminated. Understanding exactly how much remained until spring created appropriate behaviours without causing excessive anxiety. A shout from outside interrupts their conversation. Not alarm, but greeting. Neighbours have appeared at the newly cleared pathway, 3 men, including Thomas, making their way toward the hut. Community reconnection began immediately after isolation ended, another critical aspect of medieval recovery patterns. The father returns to the doorway to meet them, the men exchanging those particular hand clips that acknowledge shared survival of serious threat. Their conversation is practical, conditions of each household, structural damages discovered, resources available for sharing and recovery work prioritization. Jacob's shed roof collapsed, Thomas reports, but they got the animals out first. This information immediately enters the community recovery calculation, a household needing assistance with rebuilding but not facing immediate crisis requiring emergency resource reallocation. The stream's frozen solid, another man adds, good for crossing to the far woods, bad for water. This environmental update prompts immediate adaptation planning, different water collection methods needed, but improved access to alternative firewood sources now available. Medieval crisis response remained flexible, constantly adjusting to changing conditions rather than following rigid protocols. The morning's work has created enough basic functionality for the next critical recovery phase: community assessment and resource balancing. Representatives from each household will gather at midday in the village centre to report status, identify priority needs, and coordinate assistance efforts. This wasn't formal governance, but practical self-organisation that medieval communities developed through experience with recurring crisis cycles. We'll bring the bread we saved, the mother decides, selecting their contribution to the community gathering. The loaves had been deliberately set aside during storm preparations, not needed for family survival, but valuable for community recovery efforts. Such resource management reflected sophisticated planning that balanced household security with communal resilience. As midday approaches, the mother prepares to attend the village gathering, while the father continues essential clearing work. This division of responsibility wasn't gender-based tradition, but practical allocation of capabilities. Her knowledge of household inventory made her better suited for resource discussions, while his physical strength was needed for continued snow clearing before temperatures might rise and make the work harder. The grandmother prepares the contribution bread, wrapping it carefully to preserve warmth that will be welcome at the outdoor gathering. Medieval food sharing during crisis wasn't merely symbolic, but practical nutrition delivery. Hot bread provided immediate energy for those who might have faced more severe shortages during isolation. Take word of Ella and the baby, she reminds the mother. New life after storm brings hope. This seemingly sentimental observation actually served crucial community psychological function, balancing crisis impact with positive developments that maintained collective emotional resilience. The mother nods, wrapping herself in multiple layers before venturing to the gathering. Medieval winter clothing focused on strategic layering rather than single heavy garments, allowing adaptation to exertion levels, temperature changes, and moisture management during varying activities. Inside, the hut begins returning to normal winter functioning now that immediate storm response has ended. The grandmother sets the younger children to cleaning tasks neglected during confinement, shaking out bedding, sweeping accumulated debris, and reorganizing items displaced during the crisis clustering. Medieval hygiene understood the practical health impacts of regular cleaning even without germ theory. Observational connections between cleanliness and illness prevention guided consistent practices. The sick boy has improved enough to sit properly at the table, helping sort and repair small items damaged during the storm. His hands move slowly but with growing strength as he fixes a wooden spoon with a cracked handle, carefully binding it with sinew soaked to softness. Contributing even in limited ways during recovery built psychological resilience while developing practical skills. Medieval healing included purposeful activity properly scaled to recovery stages. The binding must be tight while the sinew dries, the grandmother instructs, supervising his technique. Then it grows stronger than the wood itself. This simple repair lesson contains sophisticated material knowledge, how collagen fibers contract during drying, creating tension bonds often stronger than the original materials. Medieval technology understanding emerged through such practical applications rather than theoretical education. Outside, recovery work continues as the father and sons clear essential pathways between structures. The snow they remove isn't discarded randomly but strategically placed to create windbreaks, additional insulation against north-facing walls, or packed into barrel-filling snowbanks that will provide water as they gradually melt. Nothing was wasted in medieval resource systems. Even excess snow became useful when properly managed. The day progresses with steady improvement to basic functioning. Pathways connect critical areas, structural integrity is confirmed throughout the homestead, and normal winter activities begin resuming their rhythm. The mother returns from the village gathering with community news and recovery plans, which she shares while the family takes a brief midday meal. 3 families need roof repairs before the next snow, she reports between bites of reheated stew. The men will rotate help tomorrow, starting with Jacob's shed. This cooperative labour system emerged naturally in medieval communities where specialised skills and tools might be limited, but collective effort could accomplish what individual households couldn't manage alone. And Ella? The grandmother asks, her concern for the new mother and infant evident. Doing well, the baby feeds strongly. The mother smiles, sharing this positive news that brightens the recovery atmosphere. New life successfully navigating crisis represented hope in tangible form, evidence that the community's future continued despite winter's challenges. As afternoon advances, the quality of light begins changing, the brilliant post-storm clarity softening as high, thin clouds return to the western horizon. The father notices this immediately during his outdoor work, pausing to study the sky with practiced attention. Weather shifts again by tomorrow, he predicts, reading subtle atmospheric signals invisible to untrained observers. This continuous monitoring reflected medieval weather awareness, never assuming stability but constantly watching for changes that would affect work planning and resource management. Inside, the grandmother has begun preparation for evening activities focused on recovery support. Extra food is prepared for family members who have expended significant energy in outdoor work. Medicinal teas steep for treating inevitable minor injuries from the day's heavy labour. Repair materials are organised for mending tools stressed during intensive use. The sick boy continues improving, now moving carefully around the hut to stretch muscles weakened by bed rest. The grandmother watches his progress with experienced assessment, noting his colour, breathing quality, and movement capability. Medieval healing practices included graduated activity progression, understanding how appropriate movement supported recovery while excessive exertion risked relapse. Tomorrow you might step outside briefly, she tells him, offering both encouragement and appropriate limitation, just to the doorway and back to remind your lungs how to handle the cold again. This careful reintroduction to winter air followed observed patterns of successful recovery, gradual exposure rather than immediate immersion that might trigger respiratory setbacks. Late afternoon brings the community's collective labour results. The father returns with Thomas and other men who have completed essential repairs to Jacob's collapsed shed. They stomp snow from boots at the doorway, faces reddened from exertion and cold, but expressions showing satisfaction at work accomplished. The animals are sheltered again, Thomas reports as the men accept hot drinks from the grandmother. We salvaged most of the roof beams. This efficient report contains multiple levels of success: livestock secured, building materials preserved for reuse, and collective work accomplished without injury or further damage. The evening meal carries a different quality than storm-confined dining, still focused on essential nutrition but including celebratory elements that acknowledge successful crisis navigation. The mother adds dried berries to the porridge, a small luxury saved for special occasions. The father shares a portion of preserved meat normally reserved for greater scarcity. These minor adjustments weren't merely indulgence but psychological technology, using food experiences to mark transition from crisis to recovery, reinforcing collective resilience through shared acknowledgement of survival. Conversation during the meal focuses on community status rather than just family concerns, which households need continuing assistance, how collective work will be organised tomorrow, and long-term repairs that must be completed before the next major storm. Medieval planning horizons maintained this balance between immediate needs and future preparation, never allowing current success to diminish readiness for coming challenges. The ice bridge across the stream will make wood gathering easier, the father notes, identifying opportunity within changed conditions. We should bring in extra while the crossing holds. This adaptive advantage-seeking characterized medieval crisis response, finding potential benefits within altered environments rather than focusing solely on restoration of previous conditions. As evening deepens into true night, the family settles into the first normal winter evening routine since the storm began. The fire burns at regular winter levels rather than crisis intensity. Sleeping arrangements return to standard winter configurations rather than heat conservation clustering. The psychological atmosphere shifts from vigilant crisis management to sustainable winter living, alert but not hyper-focused, careful but not anxious. The grandmother begins a different kind of story than the crisis night tales, this one about spring planting from her childhood, describing seed varieties lost to time and growing methods specific to their region. The narrative serves multiple purposes: entertainment certainly, but also knowledge preservation, seasonal anticipation building, and subtle reminder that winter always eventually yields to renewal. The pea flowers were purple-blue, not like the white ones we plant now, she describes, her hands mimicking the climbing vine's growth pattern. They grew tall as a man and needed strong poles cut just when the moon was right. This casual mention of moon phase timber harvesting contains sophisticated observational science. Medieval people recognized how lunar cycles affected sap flow and wood properties for specific applications. The children listen with engaged attention, winter's darkness and confinement temporarily forgotten as their minds fill with images of growing things and seasonal change. This psychological transportation served crucial functions during winter's longest stretches, preventing the depression that extended darkness could trigger, maintaining hope through biological connection to cyclical renewal, and preparing mental frameworks for the activities that would be needed when thaw eventually came. Night fully arrives, stars brilliant in the post-storm clarity, temperature plummeting further as radiation cooling intensifies without cloud insulation. Inside, the family prepares for the first normal winter night sleep cycle since the storm's interruption. The fire is banked properly for standard winter duration, rather than crisis maintenance. Water is positioned to prevent freezing without requiring middle-night attention. Animals settle into their regular winter quarters rather than emergency confinement locations. The sick boy receives his final medicine of the day, his grandmother's experienced hands recognizing the transition from acute treatment to recovery support. 2 more days of the strong brew, then back to preventive tea, she decides, adjusting treatment as healing progresses. Medieval healthcare remained dynamic rather than protocol-driven, constantly assessing and adapting based on observed response rather than rigid schedules. The father makes a final check of outdoor conditions before the family settles for night. The cold's intensity has peaked, stars brilliant in the black sky, snow surfaces already crusting with radiational freezing. His assessment is brief but comprehensive. Temperature trends, structural stability confirmations, and weather pattern predictions, all processed through experienced observation rather than instruments. Clear through morning, then clouds returning, he reports upon re-entry, the family adjusting tomorrow's work plans accordingly based on this simple but reliable forecast. The knowledge that weather would deteriorate again created clearer priorities for tasks requiring good visibility versus those possible in reduced light conditions. As the family prepares for sleep, conversation quiets naturally, bodies and minds ready for the deeper rest that follows crisis resolution. The grandmother's voice offers final observations that serve as both practical assessment and gentle reflection on their collective experience. "We've weathered worse and will likely face better," she says, her weathered hands smoothing bedding with automatic care. The cold teaches what comfort cannot, if we're wise enough to learn. This simple philosophy captures medieval resilience psychology, acknowledging hardship without resentment, recognizing its educational value, and maintaining perspective that neither minimizes challenges nor magnifies them beyond human capacity to endure. Such balanced assessment supported continued functionality through winter's long duration without succumbing to either complacency or despair. The hut grows quiet as family members settle into their sleeping places, the fire's diminished light casting gentle shadows across the simple interior. Outside, the winter night deepens around their small island of warmth, stars wheeling slowly across the black sky, snow crystals glinting occasionally when moonlight finds them through bare tree branches. Medieval nights held dangers, certainly. Cold that could kill within hours, predators drawn to human settlements by hunger, the constant threat of fire or structural failure. Yet they also offered profound peace unavailable in modern environments, true darkness unbroken by artificial illumination, silence unmarred by mechanical background noise, and connection to natural rhythms that modern schedules have largely erased. The father is last to fully settle, his responsibility for family safety keeping him alert slightly longer than others. His final checks complete, he too surrenders to sleep's approach, body relaxing into well-earned rest after crisis navigation and recovery exertion. And so this medieval family completes another cycle of winter survival, storm confronted, challenges overcome, community connections strengthened, and knowledge deepened through direct experience. Their methods weren't primitive approximations awaiting modern improvement, but sophisticated systems evolved through generations of practical refinement. The sunken hearth that spread heat horizontally before rising, the raised sleeping platforms that captured warm air near the ceiling, the thick straw mattresses with thousands of insulating air pockets, the strategic use of animals as living heaters, the nightcaps and breathing warmers that prevented body heat escape, the careful fire banking techniques for overnight maintenance, and the segmented sleep patterns that allowed essential middle night tending. All these represented not desperation, but ingenious adaptation to winter's challenges using available resources. As your own eyes grow heavy, thoughts drifting between medieval ingenuity and your own comfortable bed, consider how these ancient knowledge systems kept humanity alive through countless winter nights before modern technology arrived. The wisdom embedded in those simple solutions, working with natural principles rather than against them, conserving resources through careful observation and supporting community resilience through shared knowledge, offers lessons that remain relevant despite centuries of technological change. Let the gentle rhythm of medieval winter nights carry you towards sleep, your modern bed now feeling all the more comfortable for understanding what came before, the countless generations who developed the survival knowledge that allowed humanity to weather winter's challenges and emerge, again and again, into spring's renewal.